Remember, 98% of most people, they have no understanding of how to defend themselves or how to even fight. They think they do, but they don't. Turns out you probably need it more than most.
Welcome, everybody, to the Warrior Podcast. Today, I have a special guest. He is a 28-year veteran of the Batavia Police Force. He is a veteran of the United States Air Force. He has his own martial arts studio, which we're going to talk to about that. And he's running for the Illinois State Senate in District 42. Please help me welcome Edgardo Eddie Perez.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eddie, for coming. It's been wanting to get you on here for a long time. So what I like to do is take me into your lives and your beginnings. Tell me how it all started.
Now, that's the scary part, too, because you're talking about a rabbit hole. We can go in deep on this. But I was born in Aurora, Illinois. On the east side of Aurora, there's an area called the 700 block of. I was raised in the 700 block of Galena. Aurora, where I was born, was a hospital called St. Charles Hospital. It's not there anymore. It's off of New York Street.
Is it in St. Charles or no?
No, it's actually in Aurora.
Okay, but it's called St. Charles.
St. Charles Hospital. Yeah, it was. I think right now it's an assisted living center. It's on New York Street. What used to be that's by different grocery stores and everything around that area. For Root Street, but it was a major hospital where a lot of people, there was like before Mercy and the hospital, that was one of the two big hospitals in Aurora, St. Charles and St. Joe's.
And you were born on what day?
June 5th, 1964. Yeah.
June 5th. We're 1 month apart.
Yes.
So
Gemini. I'm Gemini. Yeah.
I'm a Taurus. I'm born in May, and I got to tell you, my friend, you are a romping, stomping 61-year-old. That's all I'm saying.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so take me through your childhood, and where did your parents come from?
My parents came from the mountains of in Puerto Rico of Camuy and Lares, Puerto Rico. So my mom was raised in Camuy, and my dad in Lares, which the areas that they came from, I mean, we are right there. They're on the mountains, so you can almost like walk from one area to the other. But they were both raised in those areas. So we always claim that our family's from both, even though we kind of pull a little bit towards the Lares side because that's where my dad was from and probably the town that I'm most familiar with.
Did they know each other there and then get married and come here, or did they come here and then meet each other?
Interesting story on that one. My dad had a very difficult childhood. He was one of those kids where I'll go back in a little bit of detail on that. My grandmother fell in love with this guy, and they had a relationship, never got married, and my dad was the child of them. And he actually fathered two, my father and my aunt. But he never married my grandmother, even though they had this long relationship but he was of what you would consider a higher class.
Your grandfather.
My grandfather, he was of a higher class. So he ended up marrying somebody else with a little bit better status. And so my grandmother was more of what they considered a lower status and more of a worker. And so my dad had a difficult childhood, whereas he had a father who kind of denied his existence. Everybody said, well, we know that's your son because he looks just like you, but he didn't acknowledge his existence. And at his second grade in school, he was already pulled out of school and immediately made to work. So he had to start working for the family, start helping out. Coincidentally, my mother's father and my mother's grandfather kind of took him in. Not they just kind of helped the family out. And so when they would work the sugarcane fields, it was my great-grandfather that would take my dad out and they said, come with me. And they kind of took ownership of taking care of him, keeping an eye on him, making sure, because they knew that was the only father figure he had.
And their child married.
Yes. Yeah. So that's how my grandfather knew my dad growing up. He was always helping out with the family, always part of it. At 19 years old, there was it was in the early 50s, there was a big wave of Puerto Ricans that came into the Midwest. And they came into the Midwest, especially like the Aurora area. There was a place that opened up called the Aurora Paper Mill. We call it in Spanish, we call it La Papelera. Okay, it was a Aurora Paper Mill. And my dad at that time, he came with with a step-grandfather and the guy who ended up marrying my grandmother. And they were in the East Coast and they were working their way this way. They were cherry pickers. So anything they can get a job. They started a program in Puerto Rico called Operation Bootstrap. And I think that was designed to bring people kind of take people out of Puerto Rico and bring them to the United States. And they were trying to, kind of before the time, they were trying to gentrify Puerto Rico. So they said, okay, we get the very poor people out of Puerto Rico and we bring them to the States. And very similar to like they did in Italy, like they did in Greece back in the 30s and 40s. The difference was that those who came from Italy and Greece, there was a lot of mileage between. So they came here and established themselves and they stayed here. When you come with such short distance between Puerto Rico, they didn't. They did is they came here, they made a lot of money, and they started sending money back, and they reestablished themselves there. But that's for another story. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he came here, and from people who had already made it here, they sent messages and saying, hey, there's a factory that just opened up. It's a huge paper mill. They need bodies. They need as many bodies as possible. So guys piled in cars. They came out here. They drove from the East Coast, and they had friends already here, so they kind of stayed with each other. And they immediately went to the factory, lined up there, and seen where they can get jobs. It turned out that my dad was almost at the end of the line. So when they finally said, "Okay, we've had enough. We've got enough people working. We're done," he didn't make the cut. So he's standing there. So what he does is, and this is related to me by my uncles and this. What he does is he says, "Fine. I drove all this way here. I'm going to get this job." So every single day, he packs his lunch. He goes to the place as if he's going to work. He sits outside the factory, sits down all day long. When the people go out to lunch, he eats lunch with them. And then they go back inside and he sits outside again. But he doesn't go inside. So it was very, very difficult work. And a lot of people, survival of the fittest. Only those who really could push themselves ended up, and my dad knew it. He knew eventually if he stayed long enough, people were going to quit and he could fill those places. And that's what happened. After a couple of weeks of doing that, one of the foremen inside asked and said, "Hey, who's that guy that's constantly sitting outside? He's been sitting outside every single day. He eats with everybody, but then he stays out there waiting, and then he goes home at the end of the day." And he goes, "Oh, that guy's just waiting to see if somebody quits so he can get the job." He goes, "Bring that guy in here. I want to hire him."
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
Right away you got a good worker.
Yep. And that's what he did. And he worked there for a lot of years until he ended up working for another company, another place very close to there called Sealmaster. That's how my dad got started here. And so he saved up enough money to then go back to Puerto Rico. He married my mom. And then, so he was living here. He came here very young, but he didn't get married till he was in his late 20s. So he came here at 19 years old.
Wow.
So he was already living here for 10 years, established, was making money, and he's doing, okay for himself for those days. Enough now to say, okay, wait a minute, I've got enough money now that I can get married, I can have a family, and we can start that process.
So he started the family out there?
No. He when he went back, he asked permission to marry my mom, and then he brought her back here, and we were all born here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's the American story, man.
American dream, yeah.
That's awesome.
And there was back then there was no special treatment. I mean, my dad often used to tell us, he said, the first things he had to do when he got here, and I'm sure your family's the same thing, back then you needed a bank card. So you had to get a bank card and a driver's license. And he goes, there was no special, bilingual programs for that. You figured it out.
Right.
You got friends, you got somebody to say, hey, you did it before, can you help me with this? And that's what he ended up doing. And remember, keep in mind that my dad had a second grade education. So he could read letters by memorization, and he knew everything by memory, but he couldn't read. So everything he had to do by memorizing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. So when he had to do a test, he had to memorize everything and act like he was reading. He wasn't reading.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. My lineage too, with my grandparents, very similar. My grandma and grandpa were both in mountain towns in Sicily, and they didn't know each other. And they came here at different times, and my grandmother's brother worked with a man, and they were talking one day, and my grandma's brother Vito said, I have a 16-year-old sister. She's looking for a husband. He goes, well, I'm looking for a wife. They met each other, and they're married in a month. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And then they had 10 kids, and they, didn't speak the language at all. And my grandpa worked hard jobs too. He worked on the railroad for 75 cents a day, and you grind, right? That's the spirit of America. You rise and you grind every day, which we could go on an offshoot here about, people not having that ethic anymore and wanting everything from the government. But you will make it in this country no matter what if you get up and you grind every day.
Yes. And set a good example, because it's not what you say. If you just talk, it's like a barking dog. It's all you're hearing is the noise. But if you're setting it, like you said, like your grandfather, and you're working every single day and everybody else is seeing that says more than any talk you can possibly do.
Amen.
You know,
it's talk to talk, but you got to walk the walk.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
All right, so now they're here, and then they start a family, right? And you're all in Aurora still?
We're in Aurora, like I said, 700 block of Galena. As we grew up, it was actually at that time. You remember the movie Stand By Me?
Yeah.
Okay, it was a very Stand By Me kind of thing. We rode our bicycles everywhere we went. You know, we were the kind of kids. We were that generation that hung their baseball mitts on their bikes just in case a baseball game came up.
Yeah,
you know?
I love it.
We knew where to go, and we knew if there was a game going on, we could jump in. You know, so we were that generation that left. I mean, during the summertime, you ate quick breakfast. You weren't expected to be seen again until dinner time.
Yep.
You know, but you had to show up at dinner time. But you took off. You rode your bicycle. You played games. You were nonstop. I have to believe that we were probably on bicycles all over the east side of Aurora, everywhere. And back then, in that time, it was still pretty safe to do it. It didn't start getting we didn't start seeing a lot of the gang influence from Chicago into Aurora, for myself anyway, until about the late 70s. No, I shouldn't say that. But yeah, about the late 70s, early 80s. Then we started seeing a lot more gang influence. But when we were kids, like late 60s, early 70s, it was perfect to be, have a good time. And the funny part was, remember I told you all these Puerto Ricans came, and there was I don't think we knew any Mexican families. I take that back. There was like one or two Mexican families that we knew, but the majority were Puerto Rican. Because everybody was Puerto Rican, I mean, my neighbors across the street, my neighbors next door, their neighbors, everybody else. My brother and I actually entered second grade, without knowing a word of English.
Wow.
We were born here, but who spoke English to us? And so we didn't. And by the way, TV, forget it. You had like three channels. We had Channel 9, we had channel, which was a Channel 44, Channel 32, Channel 9, WGN. You had those main channels, and Dad was watching baseball so there was nothing else for us to really see. So we, like I said, we went to school. I'm like, man, we don't even know the language, and we're born here. So the nuns immediately thought we were born in Mexico. Because everybody, if they speak Spanish, are probably Mexican. Even back then. So, but kids are kids. And we adapted immediately. I got to say, my brother and I were speaking English probably within the first couple months.
So just you and your brother?
At that time, it was just my brother and I. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up in Humboldt Park. You talk about that's little Puerto Rico over there, but we did have gang problems.
Yes.
So we did ride our bike everywhere to a certain line. And then you knew if you went past this particular street, there was more gang activity, and you would not cross that line. It was like a physical boundary. But going back to the baseball thing, the big deal for us was who's got the ball.
That's exactly what it was. Yes.
Because you'd hit that ball until it was a bunch of string, right?
Yeah. It was so beat up. Yeah. But who's got the ball? Yeah. Somebody had to have a ball. You're right.
And then sometimes we'd find it rubber coated in the grass in the park. You know what I mean? And there's hey, got a ball, and everybody would go play. So we were blessed, brother, to live in that time.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
The next generation, or maybe two generations after, when the technology and stuff, they didn't have that. That to me was the end of the golden age of being a kid.
I think so too. I think, and the thing about our generation is we are probably the most adaptive generation, because we didn't start with any of this thing. But look at us now. We've adapted to everything. As technology progresses, you and I, we immediately gravitate towards that and learn it. We were able to do that. We understand that. Going back to what you said about Humboldt Park, so I had family who lived in Westtown, it was like Humboldt Park, Wicker Park, and then Westtown came a little bit down a little bit closer, a little further east. And I remember my cousins telling us the same thing. You don't pass this area. And that area, there was a gang called the Ashland Vikings. And I remember the Vikings were, I think they later on changed into something else. But the Ashland Vikings, they had the, what was that street there? The street was Chestnut, and I think it was Ashland. Yeah. But it was on Chestnut area, and that area there those blocks belonged to them. And they were like, hey, listen, don't cross over that area. We're going to hang out over here. And I never really quite understood the concept of that until I got much older. But we were little. We're talking about 7 years old, and he was already schooling us on what to watch for. And that was, you grew up in that environment. He grew up in that environment. So at such a young age, he was already schooling us on what to watch for.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the gangs that I remember, the two rival gangs back when I was a kid were the Latin Kings and the Imperial Gangsters. And I witnessed a couple gang wars on the street. None of them involved guns, but they were pretty brutal. You know, bats with nails in them and stuff like that. And, you know, when I moved out to the suburbs, you know, I had that 1,000-yard stare where the kids in Berwyn, they didn't even know what a gang was, you know. So I was always had that situational awareness that they didn't have. You know, I still have that. All right. So now you're going through school. Are you getting into sports?
My brothers and I, and later my sister for a short term, because then we ended up moving, but we went to Sacred Heart School, which was a school on the east side of Aurora. And I played basketball for 4 years. And when I say I played basketball for 4 years, I want to really kind of say that I sat on the bench for about 4 years. Okay, I was a kid that was not very coordinated. You know, I could ride a bicycle, I could do things like that, obviously, but I threw the ball like I was left-handed, even though I was right-handed. I wasn't really coordinated when it came to sports. You know, I was rightfully so. I was last picked in a lot of the teams. I just wasn't. It wasn't until much later where I was brought into, and that'll be another story. But I brought into the first martial arts school that I found my niche. You know, but before that, you could say I played sports, but.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough. And I didn't get into sports till later on. So I got to ask you this because I remember this from growing up in Humboldt Park. My best friend, Julio, was Puerto Rican, and there was a rivalry between Puerto Ricans and Mexicans. Like it was a tangible thing that he talked about all the time. Is that a real thing, or was it a real thing?
I think it was a real thing, especially when a lot of Mexicans started moving into the area. Yes, it started being a real thing. And then what happened was, and I don't know exactly when it happened, it was more than everybody started to understand that, you know, we both spoke Spanish. And I think it happens in the church. You know, you start realizing that everybody goes to the same church and starts hanging out, you know, and those kind of things. So there's more of a unity. And I don't see that as much as like I said, at one time, you still have, you know, a lot of Mexicans will say, you know, well, you don't understand what it's like to be Hispanic because Puerto Rico is part of the United States. You're born with, if you're born here or you're born over there, you're still born with a passport. You know, you understand what it's like to have that American help, that safety net that's always there protecting you. And whereas the other, you know, either through South America or Mexico, they don't get that. And there's to a point, I get that because we do. I mean, Puerto Ricans we're spoiled. You know, whether we want to admit it or not, you know, you're spoiled because we do have a safety net that our other Latinos don't have. They don't have that. You know, that's why you're having the issues. We'll talk about that, but that's why you're having the issues of trying to get a better life. Because they don't have those safety nets, and their own countries are not offering a safety net that pro-U.S., non-pro-U.S., whatever. You can't deny the fact that if you go to the islands and you visit Cuba, you visit Santo Domingo, you visit other places, and then you visit Puerto Rico, you're like, well, wait a minute. Something's really nice here.
Right.
Yeah, there's something really nice here. These people here have the safety net, and they're all working to make themselves a better life. Capitalism is in full swing when it comes to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, and then thank you for explaining that, because that would make sense, like why there would be a little bit of a rift or rivalry, right? So that's interesting. And you had mentioned church. So when you're growing up, how much is a church and faith playing in your life?
It's 100%. It's all the time. Do you ever see the movie The Bronx Tale?
100 times.
Okay. So Robert De Niro, that's my dad. That movie was like, my brother and I still see it. We see that and we get chills.
Wow.
Because it was the way he was. He was not outspoken. He was a guy that worked all the time, didn't want anything from the government. He used to tell us growing up, don't accept anything from the government. You work. If you're hurting, you work. He's a guy that worked, you know, he'll work a 10, 12-hour day and then jump at overtime on the weekends to provide for us. He was that guy. So if you can think of that movie and you can think of the part that Robert De Niro played, and he didn't want us hanging, like I said, even when the gang started to getting a little stiffer and he was watching us, he said, don't even think about it. Don't. And it was interesting that a lot of the kids who I know went into the gang life, they would see my dad, and my dad would talk to them, and they respected him, and they would, you know, but he would have no problem with them coming over and everything. He would always say, if you push them away, they're just going to get worse. If they learn, if you talk to them, you know, maybe it'll be better for them. And I'll tell you a story that totally relates to that later. But he was that guy, so we kind of took his influence. We, a conservative. He was, by the way. back then, I'm sure you were the same way. Democrats were, Union were all Democrats. You know, they were tied in together. Union, Democrat. Union. Well, my dad's a hardcore Union guy. You know, so he's Democrat, but he was conservative
in his views,
his views and everything. Because, like you said, we started this conversation by talking about church. I segued with my dad first because he didn't go to. That's one thing he didn't do. He didn't go to church. It was my mom that pushed us to the church. I mean, every Sunday we went to church. We had to do this stuff, and we had to be at church. We went to a Catholic school,
which they paid for, right?
Huh? Which they paid for. Yeah, it was all private schools that they worked hard to pay for, and so they made sure that we were there all the time. And I remember my brother and I, when you start getting around 7, 8, 9 years old, you start really worrying about your parents. You know, I don't know if every kid goes through that fear, like, what if I lose my parents? What if I lose my parents? And going to church, I realized my dad didn't go to church, so we used to pray a lot that my dad would go to church. But I'd go to church. Finally, one day he just started going to church, and he changed his whole lifestyle.
Wow,
it was amazing to see. He turned it around, and all of a sudden he's going to church. And my dad ended up going. Not only did he go to church all the time, by the time he passed away, he was one of those guys that would take communion to other people's houses and help out.
Wow.
He was this is something that happened when he was younger and kept it for his whole life. Our prayers, and I tell my mother all the time, I said, you prayed for him, but a child's prayer is so strong. When children pray, they pray with pure innocence.
Yes.
And when they pray with that kind of innocence, it's not like God just hears it. God hears you screaming.
Yes.
And says, okay, I got to take a look at this. I got to look at this over here because something's happening over here, and these kids are praying for this guy. And he started going to, like I said, he started going to church, and then it became a real family thing. And that's what made our family a little bit different than most. And that's what goes back to that conservative. My dad was, like I said, he's a church guy. I carry all those things with me. Very, very. I strongly believe. People ask me all the time, "Are you a practicing Catholic?" I go, "I'm so bad at it. I'm constantly practicing. I'm constantly practicing because if you were really, really good at it, you wouldn't practice. We practice as something.
Yeah, I love that perspective.
I'm constantly practicing.
This is just an interesting observation. My father took off when I was a baby. Mm-hmm. I met him a few times. That's a long story, but we talk a lot about generational trauma and things get passed down. And if you're abused, you become an abuser. Your father did not have a father figure. Well, he had a father figure, right? But his real father, he kind of disappeared, right?
He kind of disappeared.
And look what happened to him. Yeah, he became like your hero, right?
Yeah.
He broke the cycle.
Yes, he became the father that he never had.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Interestingly enough, before he left Puerto Rico, my grandfather accepted him and basically said I was wrong.
Wow, that's a big deal.
And my father forgave him. I would talk to my dad about those kind of things, and it was hard because for him, his childhood was traumatic. And so he would tear up every single time he just bringing up anything. But he would say that you have to forgive family because family doesn't, everybody changes and family is still family no matter what.
Amen.
And we would have, the man I saw growing, I didn't know until much later that he was the man that denied my father because he came around. Now he became the grandfather that we never had. And my dad would pay. He would send him money to Puerto Rico to help them out over there. Wow. And he would pay to bring him to the United States so he could visit the family.
Wow.
Now my grandfather didn't pay for that. He paid for that. And even though he still had those painful feelings, he forgave him. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was just an amazing story. Another amazing story, and this is probably, I don't know if I should share this, but was that love that my grandmother had with him. I don't think it ever truly went away. On my grandfather's deathbed, before he passed away, it was her name he last said.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So he laid in his deathbed, and just before he passed away, he said my grandmother's name. Even though he'd married somebody else and had kids with somebody else, he said her name. And it was I don't know what happened, but if he had a lot of regrets. It was therapeutic for my dad to have forgiven him. But it was even hard for us to still even try to get stories from him. My mother's the one that tells us most of the stories because they shared a lot of stories together. But he had a hard time with those. And he didn't want us to also, he was very careful of what he shared with us about my grandfather because he didn't want us to have an opinion about him, a negative one.
Right.
That wasn't our place because those things didn't happen to you. He was pointing at us. They didn't happen to us. They happened to him.
Right.
If he could forgive them, you guys have no business holding a grudge.
That's wisdom. So my dad took off when I was a baby, and I grew up with a single mom, and she was always messed up, but she never said a bad word about him.
Yeah.
She always said he's a nice man, and someday you'll get to meet him. She did not tarnish my image of him, and your father did the same thing. Yeah. Your grandmother must be another whole story of a true warrior in itself, right? I mean, talk about struggles, right?
My grandmother was amazing. Okay, so here's an old school abuela, a grandmother, who to this day, you'll get all the grandchildren together, and we'll all try to fight about who was the favorite, because we'll all say we were the favorite. I know I was the favorite.
I love it
because she just had so much love that she shared it with everybody. Yeah. And I don't care if you were the baby or the adult. It didn't matter. There were so many of us. And, whether we were, like I said, she had my dad and my aunt, and then we had all the cousins. And then she had others, when she remarried again, she had all these other, so they were all our family. To this day, when you get us all together, said, no, I was the favorite.
But that's a tribute to how much love she was pouring into you. Like you guys actually, you don't say that ball busting, you really felt that I was her favorite because that's how she made you feel.
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome.
And that's a good way to put it, because we really feel that way.
Yeah.
To be able to say, there's no, it's not like a jar that gets emptied out. There's no top to that love. You can share love with anybody and continuously keep sharing and say, oh, wait, you're running out. You don't run out of that. So for a grandmother to just pour her love out to everybody, knowing how hard her life was. I mean, her life was just a life of just work, everything, and a lot of suffering. Nothing was easy. Puerto Rico in the 30s, 40s was like the 1850s here. There was no running water. There was nothing. If you look, you could see. I remember in my lifetime visiting Puerto Rico, it was outhouses. There was no running water.
Wow.
The first time my grandfather built his first house and it had a bathroom inside with thing, it was like, wow, you guys finally moderned up, but still, and I remember going to the wells where the city used, and we had to fill up the big tankards with water and take them back, and you lived off of that water for like 2 or 3 weeks, and you have to do it again because there was no running water.
Wow.
So we remember all those things. I remember the transitions as it starts modernizing, but it's almost 100 years behind the United States.
I want to pause and go back a little bit about your father and his advice to you about, forgiveness. The number one male figure in my life, my godfather, he told me a story when he was alive about being betrayed by his brother-in-law. His sister's brother, they had a big business deal, and he got screwed out of like a crap ton of money. And I'm like, why do you still talk to that guy? That guy's an asshole. He goes, because he's family. And if you can't give family a pass, then who can you give a pass to? It's the same thing. Yeah. So that's kind of old school.
I think you said it earlier, that old school wisdom. We have to stop and just take a kind of a breath and think about that, because you're right. When it comes to family, you start thinking about your ancestors. How would your grandmother, how would your grandfather feel about family being separated and doing things like that? Mm-hmm. So we say, you know what, I like that. Let's take a pass. Yeah, they're allowed a pass because they're family.
Yeah, and Eddie, it's heartbreaking to me. I'm an only child, so when I see siblings when they're alienated from each other, it breaks my heart. I have some family members that are like that, a brother and sister, and I've tried to do my thing about the forgiveness, but they're so entrenched in this hate for each other, and it's all BS. It goes back to their childhood. It's nonsense that they can get over. So it just breaks my heart. But and then back to the grandparent thing, we are blessed, my friend, that we had grandparents in our life. Grandparent is a whole different set of things than parents, right?
Oh my God,
they're smarter, they're wiser. It's just a blessing to have them. And I'm sure, because all ethnicities are the same in one way, food played a big part in your culture.
Oh my God, yes, yeah. Food. It's Puerto Rican culture. I mean, it's food plays, and like the Italian culture. Food is everything. I mean, that's how families get together based off food. Our food is everything for us, and we don't. I think I don't have to say anything about the Italian culture, because the fact is that there's Italian restaurants everywhere. Kind of says it all.
Right.
You don't see as many Puerto Rican restaurants. You see Mexican restaurants everywhere. So a lot of people don't understand the culture and the Caribbean style of the Puerto Rican food. But if you find a good Puerto Rican, I tell everybody, pure thing is say, listen, for anybody who's listening, if you find a Puerto Rican restaurant that's been around for a while, stop and visit. Okay, if you haven't had Puerto Rican rice, you haven't had rice. Okay, that is by far the best rice. And if somebody knows how to cook it old mama style, oh my God, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it.
So we won't stay on the food too much, but is paella more of Puerto Rican or is it from Spanish descent? Because my mother had a Puerto Rican hairstylist working for Yugo, and he took us to a Puerto Rican restaurant, and we had paella, which was this huge, massive thing, and it was so good. Is that
paella is probably more Spanish?
Okay,
but when you put it in the hands of a Puerto Rican, they probably added a lot more. Yeah, you'd be surprised if the paella doesn't have a little bit of adobo, of a little bit of that Puerto Rican flavor.
Yeah.
And if that's the first time you've had it, then you go someplace else have standard paella. You'll be like, wait a minute, it doesn't taste as good as the other one. I'm going to tell you that right now.
That's funny. Okay, so now you're progressing through school. You're a little bit into sports and not so much. What happens from grammar school to high school?
So while I'm still in grammar school, this is where that change I told you started happening. That's when we started noticing the gang influence. The gang influence in Aurora was basically the Latin Kings. Started seeing that happening and starting to grow. And it was, we had Latin Kings in our area. We had disciples in our area. We started having the Deuces. And anyone who grew up in Aurora, especially the east side, is aware when that just started happening. And a core memory for me, remember I told you before when you were having a conversation, I said that my dad had talked to some of these kids, and they knew who my dad was. We were visiting a friend, and a fight broke out, and it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this. And it was a big fight that broke out at a school called Brady. And this fight breaks up, and it was the most, for me at that age, it was the first time I'd ever seen that level of violence. Because I remember somebody picking up a bottle and hitting somebody else in the head with the bottle.
That's scary stuff when you're a kid.
Yeah, when you're a kid, I mean, you see that. And I literally froze where I was at, and I was right there in the thick of it. One of the kids who I grew up with, and his family went to our church. My dad knew them. I remember he looked right at me, and he said, "You're not supposed to be here. Get out of here right now." As he was running towards the gang fight, he was looking at me and saying, and he knew, because you're not supposed to be here. You get out of here right now. And I left, almost like telling me, hey, listen, I'm not going to get in trouble because of your dad, because you were here.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember him rushing to this. This same guy probably spent most of his life in jail.
Wow.
And
he was still trying to,
Exactly. And all these guys, I still see them to this day. I mean, a whole lifetime of police work. That same guy was years later, during one of his stints of being out of jail, they started recruiting in Batavia. And this was in the early 90s at the high schools. They're trying to get people to join the gangs. And I remember I was on duty at that time, and I drove my car, and I went right there, and I saw him, and I walked up, and I said, dude, this is my town. And he got everybody together. He said, boom, he left. They took off. And we had grown, even though we had gone our separate ways, to this day I see him, we still talk, and we don't talk about that. We talk about the things that we got. The mutual things.
What do you have in common?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we had. That's what our conversations were about. Not that kind of stuff. Whether he has regrets, I don't talk to him about that. That's his lifestyle, and he knows my lifestyle.
And there's a respect, right?
There's a level.
When you said this is my town, he
said, I'm not going to cause a problem here. I'm going to go. Yeah, I know this guy from old school. We've been around together too long because we knew each other's families, and we knew everything. And I have several people like that. And to this day, like I said, we still see each other. I see other people. We go to the, whether it's the Puerto Rican events in Aurora, and I'll always run into these guys. And what do? We sit there and talk. We laugh. We joke about when we were kids before we went our separate ways. When we were still those kids riding in bicycles and having water balloon fights. One of the things I failed to mention too, and I should, that kind of tied us all together and made us very, very strong was we were very, very fortunate growing up in Aurora, especially Sacred Heart School, to have two priests I should say three priests actually, but two main priests that I just can't say enough about. When I first got to school, there was a little kid, there was a priest there. He was an Italian priest. His name was Father Plisa. Father Plisa was like a saint to us. And coincidentally, his sidekick and partner was just out of the seminary. At the same time, I went to school for the first time, first grade. He got there as a 22-year-old seminarian, just got there for his first Father Leak.
Wow.
And talk about somebody that you'd be interested in talking to is that guy. But Father Leak, they both got there at the same time, and they had their altar boys events. He did everything for all. We were his team. He considered us team. So, we not only did we serve in church with him, Father Leak owned race cars.
Wow.
Yes. He had 2 race cars. He had one original race car was a GTO. He called it a Padres Goat. And later he sold the Goat, and he ended up having a Firebird. He called it the Padres Faith. And those were his race cars. So we were part of his pit crew.
Nice.
So between Father Plisa and Father Leak, they were not allowing us to get away from the church. It wasn't for them. It wasn't just about school and Sunday. Your whole life was going to, and he was always like on weekends, they'd have picnics. On weekends, say, hey, we're going to have water balloon fights. And he'd get us all together for nothing more than an hour of just trying to murder each other with water balloons.
Yep. And see that, their fathers, they're Catholic priests, but they're fatherly, right?
Exactly.
And them had a huge impact on you.
Yes. When Father Plisa had gotten orders from the diocese to move to another church, he ended up moving to Cary. We were brokenhearted. How are we going to survive losing Father Plisa? He was the person that we were growing up with, and then God knows what He's doing, and He brings this other guy. He knew perfect Spanish because he'd been in South America. He comes in, Father Wilhite. And Father Wilhite was, you think, how can lightning strike twice? It really did.
Wow.
Father Wilhite comes in, doesn't skip a beat. He immediately takes all his altar boys, does the same thing. We start doing the same thing, and nothing changes. To this day, Father Wilhite, who's very sickly right now, is with Father Leak, and Father Leak is taking care of him. These guys are brothers in everything other than blood. But we had the privilege of growing up. So when I tell you these gang members and these things that were involved and how the connection we had was through them. That it was those old days, those days when we were in the pit crew, those days when we were, having our events, those days where my brother and I would get called to church. Father Wilhite would call our house and say, hey, listen, I've got a wedding and I need 2 altar boys. Are your boys available? Boom, we're on our way. And he knew he used to call my brother and I his faithful servants because we never said no to it. Little did he know that the bride and groom always give us a little bit of cash on the side, and it helped out too.
Yeah, nice.
But it was. You hear all these horror stories about churches and some priests, and we didn't have that. We had these guys that were just amazing individuals who to this day I think about when I do everything that I do. Even now, running for office. I'm thinking about what would they say? How do I make sure that, between my father, my family, and then these priests, Father Wilhite, Father Leak, by the grace of God, they're still with us. Father Plisa has left us. How would they feel about those connections they had to us when they were little and how they shaped us later on? And I know so many friends, and if they're hearing this now, they're thinking the same things. Their lives were shaped by these individuals.
Yeah, you were very blessed with that.
Very
sir.
blessed, very blessed.
Yeah. And it was nice of you to call them out too.
Mm-hmm.
Those were guys that knew how to build teams.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. And a time where they weren't really doing many youth things and things like that. These guys were doing it.
Yeah, that's very cool. So these guys had an impact on you. This is still in grammar school.
This is in grammar school before I went to high school.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So now you go to high school. Where do you go to high school?
So I went to Aurora Central High School, Aurora Central Catholic. By this time, I'm a little bit more. I'm starting to become rebel. I went to a high school that was predominantly white, and I was one of the only Latinos. And I'm not going to let go of that. I'm starting to get a hard head, and I never really adapted to the Aurora Central Catholic High School way of feeling when all my family was at East Aurora High School. I have my family, my friends were all there. So after 2 years at Aurora Central, I finally told my mom, I said, Mom, you're wasting your money here. I'm still going to go to church. I'm doing everything the right way. But I want to go to East Aurora. You're paying a lot of money for this school. My brother's still going to Central. I go, you don't have to pay for both of us. I'll go to public school. I'll be fine. And my mom and my dad talked about it and said, hey, if that's what he wants to do and he thinks he's going to be good, I think it's going to work for him, let's do it.
So going from Catholic to public school, you're introduced to a lot more diverse groups of people,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Which in my opinion is good. It helps you with your life skills.
It is good. I started it started introducing me more to the gang life and everything like that too. And I think that's one of the things that my mom probably, I don't know if I think they were worried. I was, who I'm hanging out with. And there was a stage in I'm going to say it was the late 70s where she said, you know what? There was a martial arts school that opened up in downtown Aurora. There was always one there called Kim's Black Belt. Those who know, they know it was right on the corner of New York Street and Broadway, Kim's Black Belt. He ran a Taekwondo school. It didn't really work for me because I'm a little guy. So I'm not going to be a big kicker. I'm not going to, by the time I try to kick somebody, they're punching me in the face. So that was not something for me. Then my other friends who were training in the martial arts, they trained in Ishinru. Another guy at the local YWCA taught Ishinru school, and it just wasn't for me. This guy opens up this new martial arts school in downtown Aurora called Hapkido, which was, they said it was like a Korean version of judo. A lot of grabs to the bodies, a lot of throws, a lot of takedowns, and a lot of joint locks. I'm like, man, that sounds like something for me, because if I get grabbed, which I'm getting grabbed all the time because I'm just a little guy, this works out for me. So she took me to school, and I think she did it to kind of keep me out of trouble. She says, if he's focused on this, he's not focused on the other stuff. She was 100% right.
Wow.
She was 100% right. I fell in love.
So you said late 70s, so you'd be around 15-ish maybe.
Yeah.
So you're still in high school?
I'm in high school now.
Yeah.
I'm in high school, and that was the summer that I was transitioning from Aurora Central to East Aurora High School.
Okay, so then how hot and heavy do you get into martial arts then while you're in high school? You're going once a week? You going every day? Like what?
I went as much as I could possibly get away with. Whatever classes they had, I was constantly going there. And the funny part was that it was from the 700 block, which it doesn't seem like far for you and I, because we probably walked everywhere when we were younger. But nowadays, the kids will look at it and say, "You walked all that way?" Yeah, I walked downtown to the school, and I walked back home every single day. Mm-hmm. And it was so I walked from school to home. Gave myself about an hour. Usually class started about 5 or 6 o'clock. And then I walked downtown to Aurora. I went to Hapkido school, and then I went back. So that's where my martial arts training started. And like I said, I was hooked. I went to as many classes as I could possibly. If they had a Saturday class, I was there.
Okay, so in that martial art, are you going through a belt system?
Yes.
Right. So what does a belt test entail? The
belt test entail you had to know a certain amount of defend yourself from a grab, defend yourself from a takedown, be able to do certain takedowns. There was a series of joint locks that you had to be able to perform with resistance. You and I are the same. So your system was karate, correct?
It based in karate, but more MMA, a little bit of everything.
Okay. So you remember what those karate guys were like in the 70s?
Yeah,
they were animals.
Yeah,
they were beasts. They didn't worry. They didn't worry about knocking each other out in class. These guys that came from Chicago, they came to Aurora to open up their school. It was hard. I mean, we were sparring. We were sparring left and right. We were punching. I remember a particular incident where I got a little cocky, and I was actually sparring against one of my instructors, and I caught him and hit him enough to move his mask slightly across his face, which I thought would give me a blind spot. And so me, having watched enough movies, thought this would be a perfect time to do like a jumping side kick. I jump up in the air towards him to try to kick him while he's fixing his mask, because nobody called timeout.
Right.
He steps out of the way, and he punches me right in the chest as I pass his body. And I land, and I turn back towards him. And I remember standing there for like not even half a second, and the whole world just went boom. I just went out. He took every ounce of air I had and just shot it out of my body. And it was hilarious. And it taught me such a lesson. It's like, never.
It's a game changer right there.
And it was, I'm glad he did it. Another one of those core memories, because it was totally necessary to put me back on track. It's like, no. You even though it looked like I would, maybe I was faking it, but either way, I've got a lot more experience in this, in sparring, than you do.
That knocks the cocky right out of your ass, I'll tell you.
It sure did. It sure did. It made me, like, let's put it this way. I never did that again. I never even tried to do any of that. Was also the day the fancy kicks went right out the window for me. I was like, you know what? Focus on what works. That when I started seeing that, to me, all fancy kicks and everything like that is like, man, unless you're 100% sure, and if you are, you probably could do something else. A lot of these kicks, you'd be surprised at what your basics can do. You get a little fancy, probably somebody's gonna make you eat.
I agree with you, and I'll tell you a funny story. When I was training, I was a mid-level belt, orange or whatever. And I used to go with my friend Vince. And our instructor, Matsumoto, is not a big guy. He's built like a 3-flat, but he's only like 5'8".
Okay.
And Vince was like 6'2". And he goes, man, I think I could kick Mats in the head because he always looks like his head's exposed and I'm tall and whatever. He goes, I'm going to try and throw a head kick at him today when we spar. I'm like, all right, do what you got to do. So I'm sitting outside the ring and boom, there he's launching a roundhouse at Matsumoto's head. And Mats didn't even, all he did was he let the kick land. He crimped like this and he caught his leg. He couldn't get his leg out. He just caught it, right? And then he swept him and he hit the ground and got the wind knocked out of him. And that's the last time he ever tried to kick Matsumoto, you know? Yeah, but the thing about martial arts, and I had Jim Mendrick on here before, and we were talking about law enforcement and how things can escalate because of fear, right? So it's very beneficial to me if police officers have had some kind of training where they've actually been hit. Because when you get hit in your head for the first time, that's a life-changing experience. Your bell rings. It's never happened to you before.
Absolutely.
But once you get used to that, your fear of that goes away, right? It makes you a little clearer thinking.
That's why it's important, and we'll talk about this more later, but that's why it's so important for police officers. I mean, you chose a warrior field. You chose that. It didn't come to you. You chose that. So you should be taking every aspect of that as part of your training. You know, it's like, listen, if I'm in a warrior field, I need to train like a warrior. And that means fight, learn to fight, because the mat should be harder than the street. And the reason for that is because you do the mat all the time. Eventually, once you start getting used to that, and everything's hard at first. But once you get used to it and it doesn't bother you anymore, and you start enjoying the company of the people you're with, and you start training harder and harder, a street fight, you realize how you can control a person. Remember, 98% of most people, they have no understanding of how to defend themselves or how to even fight. They think they do, but they don't. You know, so if you just have some good training, and it doesn't have to be like a whole war chest of skills, but you have some good skills that you can use over and over. You will find a way to get your opponent into a position where you can use that one thing that you're good at. And you get, like, whether it's tying the person up, holding the person down. But I've seen, you and I have both seen videos of guys fighting and they can't even take somebody down on the ground. And it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? A little bit of training, just a little bit of training, you could have got past this. What the problem is, a lot of these guys will go to the training and they don't even want to be there. They'll act like, oh, this is not for me. I don't need this. Turns out you probably need it more than most.
Yeah.
The guys who are interested and they're really learning, they're the guys that are never going to have any problems because, like you said, their martial arts training as kind of like, you know, between being hit, being controlled, being physical with somebody has made them so they're not as afraid. They're not they're not worried about grabbing on somebody because they're used to being grabbed all the time and controlling somebody. So once you're doing that, the fear goes away. And that's important. That's important because it makes you comfortable. When you know how to do something, everybody benefits. Not only I benefit, my partners benefit. The person I'm arresting benefits because now none of us are hurt. Yeah. I was able to control this person. And more than anything, your family benefits because you get to go home at the end of the day. You know, and that's important.
Right. I agree with what you said, and the way you said was awesome. You picked a warrior profession. You need to do everything in your power to learn the warrior way, right? Yes. I mean, you owe it to the community even because you're serving the community. It's not something you did that you should just blow off. Yeah. So.
I mean, obviously it's got good benefits, but you're not in it for the benefits. All that stuff is the extras. You know, you got good benefits. I got this, I got that, you know, but that's not what you're in it for. If that's what you're in it for, you're in the wrong career field.
Amen.
You know, you should be in it to, I know it's cliche to say, you know, and say, hey, why are you a police officer? Well, to make the world a better place. Yeah, it's obvious. But you're there because remember, hey, I hate to tell you, I don't even care if you're in a busy town. You talk to some of these guys that are in the bigger cities and they'll tell you it's still a good percentage of boredom. A good percentage. We have boredom and then we have, oh shit. You know, those are your limits. Boredom, oh shit. Yeah. You know, and so we have to be ready for the oh shit moments, but we have to live with the boredom because that's the majority of it. And so as police officers, you have to understand that it's all part of the game and you have to be ready for every part of it. You have to come into the job to be of service. Everything has to be of service. Remember, you know, you and I both, remember the Bushido, the warrior mentality.
Yeah, the code of the samurai.
Is what? What does samurai mean? Is in service. I'm in service. If you're not willing to serve your community, serve your fellow man, and you're just doing it for yourself, you are not a warrior. You're play acting, and that uniform is a costume.
Yeah.
And I've seen plenty, and I've been, like I said, from 18 years old in the United States Air Force as a security police, all the way till today. That's a lot of years in law enforcement. And I've seen, everybody said it's a warrior field, but not everyone is a warrior. Some people getting into this job, and it's like, listen, that's not a uniform. For me, it's a uniform. For you, it's a costume, because you're wearing it, but you're not earning it. You have to earn it.
And then this is just a side conversation, but I have the greatest respect for law enforcement because you guys see the worst of humanity. People don't even realize, like, you're carrying dark storms in your head. And yeah, there's a lot of boring times, but the old shit times, some of them are really bad. And it breaks my heart when I see law enforcement officers that I don't think they can run around the block. You know what I'm saying? Because you're going to be in one of those oh shit moments, and you have not done everything in your power to actually be able to do what you need to do.
Absolutely.
That's another whole story, but I worry about that sometimes.
I do, and I think about that often, because not only are you not serving your community, your partners are going to get hurt trying to protect you. Here's the thing I tell when I train my officers, okay, whether they're deputies, court security, or corrections. When you're in trouble and you're fighting with somebody, and you're on the ground fighting with somebody, and all of a sudden backup shows up, you can look and say who that backup is, and you're either going to have two thoughts: I'm okay now, or oh shit, send me some more backup.
Oh shit, another oh shit moment.
And that's exactly. So which one are you going to be? When you show up to back somebody else up, how are they thinking when they see you?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And you got to think that way, because someday it may be you back, and you're not training for just yourself. Everybody says the same thing. It's my life. It's my life. It is not your life. It is not. It's a common flaw for people to think it's your life. The life belongs to everyone who would suffer and hurt by your loss, by losing you. If you want to see everybody who's going to cry, who's going to be brokenhearted, who's going to hurt when you're no longer in the picture, and you understand that it's no longer your life, it is their life.
Yes.
Because you affect them, and they're hurt by you no longer being present. So that's who you got to take care of, not just you. You got to take care of everybody.
Yes, that's a beautiful way to do it. And that's what I try to educate people on. Gold Star parents, right? I've seen Gold Star license plates. I leave notes all the time. We lose somebody in combat. Someone else is still paying that price for freedom, just like you're saying with the police force. Yeah. You screw up on the job because you weren't ready and you're gone, then everybody who loves you pays the price too.
Everybody who loves you pays the price.
Yeah, I love the way you teach that. We're traveling through high school. You're taking martial arts. Are you working a job at that time? You making money?
I am. I was blessed to be among the biggest bunch of idiots on the planet by getting a job at a place called A&P. You remember A&P grocery stores? There was an A&P grocery store on the east side of Aurora, and who I met at first, I didn't like this guy. He's a Cuban guy. Okay, I'll tell you a funny story of him later. But Cuban guy, I meet him through one of my friends that I grew up with. It was her boyfriend, and it's like this guy. She shows me, oh, that's my boyfriend. This guy's working at McDonald's at that time. I'm like, guy, he looks like a grease ball over there. I don't like that guy already. Turns out he ends up becoming my closest confidant, my best friend. To this day, we're brothers. Okay, so we ended up working at A&P. Then I get a whole plethora of other. I think A&P was hurting for people because they just hired all of us, and we bonded so much. We got the job done, but we were just. If you were our manager, which by the way, the manager was an Italian guy called Vince, and we used to drive him crazy. Nuts. Because we did our job, but we had to do everything goofy and make his life miserable. So he was constantly chasing us around like we were little kids. We would do the job, and then we're messing with each other constantly. I had one time, and I'll tell you this story. Mario, the guy I'm telling you about, that's the Cuban guy. So I'm cleaning the bathrooms. He tells me to clean the bathrooms. There's this rail that goes down to the bathroom, obviously for people, for handicap. Mm-hmm. So they got this rail that goes down. He goes to the security guard, and he can borrow your handcuffs. And the security guard goes, because we're all idiots. So security guard gives Mario the handcuffs. He runs back there. He goes, hey, check this out. He handcuffs me and handcuffs me to the rail and then runs. Now I'm caught here in this thing, and I can hear Vince walking down. How am I going to explain to Vince that I'm handcuffed to the thing? And Mario just took off. So what are you doing? So I as soon as he come around the corner, I grabbed the towel that I had and I wrapped it around the handcuff, and I'm scrubbing the thing like I'm trying to clean it. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "Man, this thing was so greasy, I could barely even touch this thing. So I'm trying to get all the grease off." He goes, "Okay, let me know when you're done because I got something else for you to do." And he leaves.
Nice.
And then one of my other buddies, Caesar, comes in. Caesar walks in. He goes, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I go, "Mario," and tell him to get the keys. Get the security guy, get the keys. And he showed me. He goes, "Dude, really?" And that's the kind of stuff we did to each other, So that's where I'm working. I'm working at AMP. Where Mario, by the way, is the only one of us who goes to West High School, and for some strange reason, he ends up on our East Aurora High School yearbook because he's hanging out with us all the time. So I forgot whatever happened to that guy. I go, "You don't know that guy because he went to West Aurora High School."
How did he get in the yearbook? He just showed up for the photos?
He showed up in every he went to every one of our those field trips you go on. He would jump on the bus and walk in, and nobody paid. So the teachers saw him so much they thought he was a student. He was not even a student. He would skip a day at West, come to jump on the bus to hang out with us. And I go, "Dude, you're not even getting credit." He goes, "This is fun. This is fun."
That's hilarious.
So coincidentally, Mario ended up going to the Air Force shortly after I did, and he ended up joining the Elgin Police Department. So we
similar paths.
Similar paths, and to, like I said, to this day, he's one of my biggest proponents in helping me with this running for state.
Awesome.
We've always been together. We always will be together.
One of your closest friends, then, right?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. So you're working at A&P, and then you finish high school. Yes. Anything relevant happened there?
No. At that point, it was just, like I said, just doing the job, working back and forth. Typical, I was big into the 60s muscle cars. So I had a 68 Chevelle. I was always working on that with my buddy.
396?
327. It was a 327 Malibu.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
A small block. So I had that one. I had a good friend of mine, Jeff Medina. Jeff was the wizard. He was the mechanic he put everybody's cars together. This guy literally was Gandalf on wheels.
Nice.
He fixed everybody's cars, and one of the funniest guys on the planet. So Jeff was he helped me with the cars, and I focused more on martial arts, the cars, and going to school. So and I told him at that point I was telling my mother, I'm like, my brother wants to go to college. He's more studious. We're only a year apart from each other. We're Irish twins, and he was born May 31st. A year later, I showed up June 5th. So he wants to go to college. He's much more studious. I told my mother, college isn't for me. I think I'm going to go into the military.
Did you do that right out of high school?
Right out of high school.
And I got to pause you on this. You're taking martial arts. You're a little guy like me. Mm-hmm. People trying to get the edge on you. Did you have any relevant fights, like real fights, or were you able to avoid the fights through high school?
I was able to avoid most of the fights through high school, yeah.
That's good.
And that's the group of friends I was with, we just weren't into that.
Good.
We just spent all our time, house parties. Mario, the buddy I was telling you about, was a DJ, and we would go to house party, and that's all we did. Is we had a very very safe but very memorable high school those 2 years.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
So I got nothing but good times to think about those times.
And you probably had pretty good training in your martial arts because, like in Karate Kid, right? You got Cobra Kai. They want to kick everybody's ass out on the street. And there are some martial arts trainers like that. Mm-hmm. And, when you have a good one, they teach you calmness, right?
Yes.
You always tap into that inner peace. You only fight when it's absolutely necessary.
We had three, and they were the Fowler brothers. They came from Chicago. Originally, they were Canadian born, but they came from Chicago. They had training Hapkido over there. There was Scott, Ernie, and Kevin. Each of them were masters in their own. Scott looked like a big Buddha guy. He was just solid. He was your thrower. He threw everybody all over the place. He never kicked.
And you could not throw him.
Oh my God.
Right.
Not only could you not throw him, you couldn't even put your hands around his wrist. They were so wide. He was just built like an ox. Then there was Kevin, who was just long and skinny, and guess what he was?
Striker,
kicker. He was the guy he was the one that punched me in the chest.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. And then there was Ernie, who was your great manipulator when it came to joint locks. Every one of them had their expertise, and we all knew how to deal with each one. If they were going to teach a class, you knew what the class was going to cover. Mm-hmm. So those are the guys that I spent all my time training with, and I really, they were the ones that introduced me to the martial arts and kept my mind really into it, regardless of what system later on I ended up training. I always tried to, even when I went into the military, even during my basic and tech school years or at the time, I was always looking for somebody in the martial arts or something to keep my way of going, to keep it hot. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make sure that I'm still training, that I'm still doing something, and I didn't care what it was. I mean, Hapkido was my core, but I was wanting to learn everything. Anything. I started getting, like I said, in the weapon stuff. Filipino Kali, big thing for me. So anything I could get that was just martial arts related. I think I used the Air Force to help me with that.
Nice. And back to the martial arts thing, because I have experience in that too. The fact that you had the brothers with all their own different specialties was great for you, because you're getting a different kind of sparring partner and training from each guy.
Yes.
So that was awesome.
Coincidentally, it seemed like they were 3 different martial arts, because it was the same system, but because of their way they brought it to you, it was like 3 different martial arts. One guy was teaching judo, one guy was teaching taekwondo, is what it felt like to us. And then one guy was actually teaching the hapkido, which is the joint locks, or aiki jiu-jitsu. They all had their specialties. And, like I said, you knew it, or you knew what you were going to go through just by who was in charge of the class.
Yeah, awesome. So we are deciding to go to the Air Force as you're coming to the end of high school?
Yes.
And then how does your parents take that?
My mother, obviously, mothers being the way they are, she was, not happy with the idea. She wanted us to go to school. She didn't care for the idea of going into the military. My dad was a little bit, remember, he's that mentality where, you need to take care of yourself. You need to be strong. He hated the idea that I was leaving so young, but thought about his own childhood and thought how young he left. So he said, whatever you decide, we're behind you. And but I just want you to think. He wanted me to think about it first, because we did what was called back then. I don't know if they still have it, the delayed entry program. And so in October of the previous year, I was already signed up, and I wasn't leaving till I graduated. So I was signed up, just entering into really a senior in high school. And at that point, I made the decision. I said, you know what, this is going to be for me.
And let me ask you, why did you pick Air Force of all the armed forces?
Well, there's 2 reasons. We had an extremely busybody recruiter whose name was Clyde. I'll never forget Clyde. Black guy. He was a staff sergeant. He was fantastic. Clyde was a genius when it came to us. And he would visit our schools, but he managed to get family members and friends. Like my cousin, another Mario, his name Mario Soto. Mario ended up going into the Air Force through Clyde. Then Madeline, a girl I went to school with, who later ended up being my wife's cousin. I didn't know my wife at the time, but she ended up going to the Air Force. All through Clyde, and it was easy for us because everybody around here is going to Air Force.
So Clyde was the Air Force recruiter. Obviously.
I was the Air Force recruiter.
Oh, he did a good job.
He was at every event. He really did a good job. He made it feel like there was no other branch to go to. It's like, forget about everybody else. He would say stuff like, hey, you're graduating high school. You need to go to the Air Force. If you flunked out, you could go to the Army if you want, but hey, you're smart enough. Let's go to the Air Force. So he pulled us in that Air Force direction,
Yeah, that's awesome. And, I'm big on veterans and the armed forces and stuff. And I have a Marine son. When he was starting to think about joining the armed forces, some people were talking to him and they all told him to join the Air Force. Mm-hmm. You're smart. That's where the smart people go. Don't be a Marine. He went to the Marines. Another good experience for him.
Yeah, so. I don't know if I think that's a lot of people say that, but having been in the Air Force, I don't know if I no longer agree with this. That's where the smart people go. I was there. Okay, no, trust me, that's not where the smart people go.
Well, I don't want to diss the military structure, but there's redundancies in the military structure that you're like, come on, we could do better than this, right?
Yeah.
It made all the Marines get dressed up in their full uniforms, their combat battlefield uniforms, and sit in a basement for like 12 hours and don't talk. Just sit there. Can't read a book, can't get on your phone. They just made them sit there. And you wonder, like, what is the purpose of that? Now, I don't know if they had a purpose to it or not, but couldn't you have had a couple guys come in and do some lectures on electricity or something? You know what I mean?
I can share a purpose for that because I went through something like that. And in the real world scenario, a version of it. So I ended up, and I'll get back to that later. But remember that. Let's shelve that one because I want to explain to you what probably happened.
Okay.
So when I took the test, I had no desire. I talked about becoming a cop, but people that I talked to before said, "You're too small. You're too small. You're not big enough to be a cop. You're not."
And for reference, how tall are you?
I'm 5'6".
Okay.
Yeah, 5'6". If the way things are going, I'll be 5'5" before long. But I'm 5'6". At that point, I was probably at 5'4", 5 foot. You know, I was a little guy. So they're looking at me like, you know, think about another career. Law enforcement not for you. So because I'd been told so many times that this was probably not going to be for me, I should probably think about another career. So I take the test in the Air Force, and Clyde says, you know, you tested for security police. Are you interested in that? And I'm like, well, yes, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And he goes, yeah, I can set you up for that. And so when you go in, as soon as you're done with your basic training, you'll cross over into the Security Police Academy. And if like I said, if that's what you want to do. And so that was the first opportunity I had to do something. Not only was I going into the military, I got the chance to be a cop and not even have to go through the rookie program or the cadet program. At 18 years old, I was going to go right into it. You know, so I took that opportunity. I said, you know what, I'm jumping in with both feet. You know, and I think that's where it all started. And you know, you mentioned your son being a Marine. Our academy was Marines and Air Force together. So we shared the academy together.
Oh, for to being a military police.
Military police, yeah. Gotcha. They were MPs, we were SPs. And the only funny part was we were in dorms, and for some strange reason, I still don't get it to this day, the Marines managed to find the only Quonset huts in Lackland Air Force Base. And they took them as theirs, and that was where they housed their guys. You know,
what is a Quonset hut?
So a Quonset hut is the old school thing and it's like it's just old school. I mean they would probably use storage, and the Marines came in and said, nope, we're not housing our guys in those beautiful air conditioned dorms. Those Quonset huts, are they being used? Let's clean those out, and we'll make our guys clean, and they're going to start staying there. And that's exactly
why they call them jarheads.
Yeah, and that's where they ended up staying. So yeah, but we did have the academy together at that time. Like I said, at today's day, I don't know if they still do that. It's no longer, I mean, there's still security police, but now they're referred to as security forces. Back then when I was in it, it was security police. And we, like I said, we were trained with our Marines.
And then you were in the Air Force for 4 years?
I did 4 years active and 2 years inactive.
Did you have any altercations where you, like, that were tough doing the job you were doing?
I wrote a book called Martial Thoughts. It's on Amazon. I'm not even sure if it's still in print. And I explained the first years of the Air Force really woke me up. They're what lit the fire and kind of changed. The kid who went into the Air Force and the kid who came out, two totally different people. I mean, they really, the military is really, really good about finding ways. They find you. They find the person and like your podcast, you know, they find that inner warrior. They look for it. If they can't find it, you're out. Mm-hmm. But if they can find it and they see it somewhere in there, they'll find a way to dig it out. And I think that's what they did with me. As I look back and I remember that, you know, I didn't have a high belief in myself, you know. And so the Air Force was teaching me that, you know, I didn't think I could do this, but hey, I did this. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't think I can do this. Oh, hey, I did this. And there was one guy that was constantly, he was just such an asshole. that he was always pushing my buttons. Oh, you're never going to do this. Oh, you can't do this. And I remember the one of the final obstacle courses that we were going through. There was it was one of those old school obstacle courses with a muddy swamp underneath where you're doing monkey bars and you're doing all these things and you're going through that. And I remember I'm crossing this thing and I'm going down. And I remember looking down as I was going to fall. And that guy that was always making fun of me had already fallen. He was sitting in the muck. And I went over, and that's a memory for me because I remember thinking I can get past these things. I'm better than everybody says I am, and I think that was one of the when I tell my kids, I said, you know, your schools are your alma maters, but for me and many of our veterans, our branches are the alma maters for us. Yes. You know, I'm Air Force, even though that was so many years ago. I'm always Air Force because Air Force pushed me into what I became. And it taught me service. It taught me my love for the country. You know, it taught me how much to embrace. You know, and people will say, oh, you know, they brainwash you. They do it. No, they don't. No, they don't. They let you be who you are, but they find that person and they polish it. You know, it's that using that like a blacksmith. You know, you got molten piece of metal and you're gonna turn it into a sword. The sword can be sharp or the sword could be weak. It can be broken, you know. So they all the military does is they take what's already there and the parts that are already there and they see it and they just sharpen it and clean it and they keep polishing it until they get it exactly where it needs to be. And then, I like I said, never in a million years would I ever regret that. And I would say if I had the opportunity again, I'd do it again and again and again.
Well, you sound like you could be a recruiter too, the way you said the military. That was awesome. So, so you did 4 years in the Air Force, and then what are you thinking of when you're getting out? What do you want to do with yourself?
I wanted to go into police work. At that point, I knew that that's the reason I was getting out. I was very tempted to go back in. So I had an opportunity to stay in the Air Force. And when I was during the time I was in the Air Force, I was in Korea, and I specifically picked Korea because I wanted to continuously training in the martial arts. So I did a lot of training while I was in Korea. I competed in.
What did you do in Korea? Isn't Taekwondo a Korean art, or?
Taekwondo is a Korean art, but so is Hapkido.
Okay.
So when I got to Korea, I was probably in country less than 3 days. As soon as I got a chance, I was in town looking for a nearest Hapkido school. Couldn't find one anywhere. Finally found a picture on a grocery store that had a guy throwing another guy, and I could read the kanji enough to know I recognized the Hapkido kanji. Mm-hmm. So I looked at that and I walked inside, and with broken English, I asked the guy where that school was at, and he basically pointed me the way. And I tell everybody to this day, I said I was in the country less than 3 days, and I'm having dinner with my instructor.
Wow.
At his house. You know, we sat there. I walked in there. I introduced myself. I said I just got into the country. He asked me to come by to school. We talked some more. He asked me about my Hapkido background, because he said he reminded me that American Hapkido was different than Korean Hapkido. That his teacher was Cho Young-sul, which was the founder.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so that was one of his teachers in Daegu, and so he'd come to Songtan, which was a city, and he taught it very much like not as many kicks. It looked more like the original Aiki Jiu-Jitsu that came from Japan. But he explained to me, he would tell me in broken English, don't forget your kicks, don't forget any of that stuff. It's good for you. I don't teach as much of it, but just add it together, And he was an excellent, excellent teacher. You know, years later, after I'd already been police work, and like 10 years later, I'd gone back to Korea to see if I could find him. He'd already retired and moved on, and ended up meeting his inheritor.
Oh wow,
yeah,
very cool.
And spending time with Master Lee.
Yeah, very cool. And this is just a sidebar on the kicks. The styles I studied, we did high kicks, but we were taught that those aren't really practical. But the low kicks are very effective.
Yes.
You know, when you plant your shin into somebody's thigh, that kind of screws up their whole, game, especially on the street. We, of course, got used to the leg kicks and stuff, but you get hit enough times and your leg starts to cramp up, you're useless.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Master Yu used to tell us that if you can touch the guy, you're in a good position to kick the guy. And then he meant those shin kicks, those low scoop kicks. He goes, those knee kicks. He goes, those are the ones that's Hapkido. He goes, you start getting further and further away, that's not Hapkido. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's, like I said, that's in other Hapkido schools, very different. But that was his way of teaching that.
So you and I are both not tall guys. And the guys I train with, we're usually always much taller than me. Mm-hmm. So we'll be in full contact sparring and stuff like that, and they're teeing off on my head with the head kicks, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, when we're sparring with headgear on, it's restrictive, right? Because your peripheral vision is a little bit narrowed. And I'm like, how come I can't see these things coming, you know? And then I realized that for them to kick me in the head, they have to change their range. So as soon as I saw them going from this range, you know, a little further away from me, I knew they were setting up for a head kick. Right, because you would see their head move away from you, and you're like, "Oh, I don't even have to see it. I know it's coming." You know what I'm saying? And then what I like to do is, when that head kick is coming, I'm loading up a low kick while their leg's up in the air. I'm hitting their plant leg because they can't block it. You know what I mean? So a lot of times I would knock them over when their head kick was being launched.
And the beauty of that is his balance is, I mean, he's got to give up a little something to get that kick as high as he wants, and you're taking advantage of that.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So that's a little sidebar.
Yeah.
All right, so you got out of the Air Force. How did you get into law enforcement then?
I ended up taking a job as security at AT&T.
Which entail what? Patrolling a building?
Yeah, exactly. Patrolling a building, going from floor to floor, checking.
But you're not armed though doing this?
No, none of that. Sometimes when a person gets out of the military, there's a transition. There's a transition that's not good. You know, you start missing. I got out, and all I could think about was how chaotic the civilian world was. Everybody wears what they want.
No structure.
There's no structure at all. It was just, and I had gotten used to structure. I started missing the military life. So I remember telling at that time I had a discussion with my mother, and I remember telling her, I said, if I don't find what I want, I'm gonna go back, and I'm thinking about going back because I'm missing that. I miss everything about the military life. And so I ended up getting a job at the Department of Corrections, the Illinois Department of Corrections. I worked at IYC, Valley View, a juvenile center. And so I worked there for a while. And during the whole process, actually, what I did was I was on that job probably about 8 months when I went back to the recruiter and went through an ASVAB again and retested to go back into the military. Because I was like, man, none of this is good for me. If I go into the military, he told me that all I'd have to do is get new orders because I'd been out less than a year, and all I have to do is they're going to cut orders for me. You'll get a new assignment. You get there, you get your uniforms, and it'll be just like you translate, like you were on a big long vacation. So that to me that sounded great. I'm like really close to doing it. When I ended up taking the test for Batavia Police Department, and I started testing for Batavia. The reason I chose Batavia, not Aurora, the home that I grew up in, was because of my friends. I had a lot of people that I knew. I didn't want to get caught up with people that knew me. And I wanted to go to a town that I knew nobody. That I didn't have to worry about somebody saying, hey, listen, I just got arrested. Can you help him out, or can you help me out? I didn't want anything like that. I wanted to start off fresh. And Batavia seemed like, I used to tell everybody, I said, listen, you can be a cop in a big town and you're like swimming against the current. But a small cop, a cop in a small town, you can make a difference. One cop. And that's why I tell all the guys who work as, first of all, 75 to 80% of all police departments out there are small, under 50 men, whether people realize it or not. Secondly is one good cop can make a difference in a small community. You could do so much if you just gave yourself the opportunity. And that's what I wanted. I wanted the opportunity to make yourself a difference. And for me, Batavia was perfect. It was like close enough to home. I still lived in Aurora, but that became my town. That was I felt like one of those old feudal samurai that just was in charge of my village. I'm not worried about the big village. I'm not worried about stuff. I want to be in charge of my village and take care of my people, and that's how I felt.
Yeah, nice. That's a pretty cool mission. I didn't think about it that way. A lot of gung ho young men, they want to get on the CPD, and this is the big show. But like to your points, in a smaller environment, you make more of a difference.
Make a difference, yeah.
So you passed the test. You're on the police force, and I didn't ask you. When you're like in the Air Force, are you carrying a sidearm all the time?
I am. Back then we carried the .38. But my main weapon was the M16. So I always carried an M16 everywhere with me.
Okay, well, the .38 was a revolver?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Especially when I was like, when I worked town patrol in places like in Korea. We worked town patrol, so we worked in conjunction with the Korean National Police. And if there was a fight going on, if it was an American involved, they came and backed us up. And if they committed a Korean crime, they would arrest them, and we would have to work with them to pull them over to our side. If they had no charges, we would have to deal with it, either remove them from the situation or charge them. I ended up I'm on the police department now. I've been on the police department for a couple of years, okay? And I get recruited by a guy who spots me one time. I'm not going to give you his name because I don't want to get him into any problems. He's an FBI agent. He's the FBI agent that kind of was responsible for a lot of us going undercover. And so he sees me and he goes, man, that guy would be good to do some undercover work. And he meets me one time and we talk, and he says, hey, would you be interested in doing some undercover work? And I said, sounds like fun to me. And he goes, would it be in Aurora? And I go, oh, a lot of people know me in Aurora. Yeah. So he goes, no, he goes, I'll make sure that it's in an area where a lot of people don't know you. And we got certain areas where they're dealing a lot out of them. We're talking, quarter key, half key, kilos. We think we've got an intro to get you in. Would you be interested in doing it? And I said, of course, I have to get approval from everybody. And the chief of police says, yeah, because he wants to work in conjunction with the FBI. So I end up start doing undercover work. Now, remind you, I'm still working in uniform, and I'm still working. So I would leave and go to Aurora, change clothes, grub myself up a little bit, and then go in and do these deals. And I'd buy I walk out with a quarter key or something, and I'd give it to the handlers. and I would take care of the paperwork and everything. And then I go back to work. I put my uniform on. I'm directing traffic and doing this stuff. So I'm basically playing two roles. Well, it gets to the point that some of these cases get so hot that the SAC, which is the supervisor, the head guy in charge of the FBI, he basically reaches out to the chief and says, "Hey, listen, this is getting dangerous because this kid's out here directing traffic, and we're doing deals with him, and people are going to recognize him." So that pulled me in what we call the OCDET, which is the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force with the FBI. So they start pulling me into that and doing more. So I start doing more of that and doing less of the uniform. So I start working cases with them, and then the same FBI agent says, "Listen, why don't we just reassign him to the state police?" And he becomes part of the North Central Narcotics Task Force. So at that point, I joined the North Central Narcotics Task Force. I'm doing undercover work for them, and I'm all over the place. I'm from areas in Humboldt Park, downtown Chicago, wherever the state needs me. I was their guy. I was going to Kendall County, doing stuff in Kendall, doing stuff in DuPage, and then as far as all the way down to Springfield, Sangamon. I was all over the place, kind of doing drug deals where they needed a specialist that was a new face, and they're worried about getting burned. That's where they would call me.
So you're purchasing drugs a lot?
Yes.
And you got to really be alert and aware when you're doing that.
Yes.
Because in a moment's, if they know the gig is up, you're dead man, right?
And you got to really watch it too, because your ego starts playing, and you got to, and when you're young, it starts becoming a game to you. And so you start thinking, I can take this guy. I can get this guy. I can do this. And sometimes you take chances that you shouldn't take. I remember deals. I mean, one of my partner in the North Central he later became the chief of police in Aurora PD. And we did a lot of stuff together, a lot of deals. And he was a little bit older than I am, so he was more like a mentor. He was helping me out. Hey, dude, watch this, and keep an eye on this. But there was times, and I tried my best not to, but I know there was times that I took too many chances. And I was like, I probably shouldn't have done that. I was so bad, I'm going to tell you right now, that I had gotten my appendix taken out, and I went back to work probably before I should have, because it was still sore, and I was just supposed to be desk duty. And then they said, hey, this was in Elgin. They said, there's a guy slinging dope at the grocery store, and I've got a number, and he's bragging to everybody that he's better than Domino's Pizza, that if you call this number, he'll meet you in less than a half an hour. And he goes, hey, why don't you call this number? And we can see if we can do a code buy. I'm like, man, I'm technically supposed to be on light duty. But man, there's that ego again. Mind you, if I'd gotten kicked in the gut, or if this guy ran from me, I felt like I had almost like a hernia, because I had to go really slow. And I remember when he pulled around the lot in it was a Butera parking lot in Elgin. He pulls around the lot in the Butera parking lot, and I see the car, and I kind of wave him out, and I start walking over. By the way, I know you can't tell now, but by that time my hair was long, and it was out to the middle of my back in a ponytail. And I had the same beard I have now, but it was black, believe it or not. And I walk up to the car, and I'm leaning over. I'm actually leaning, and I'm doing this, and I'm leaning like an idiot. I'm thinking to myself, why am I doing this? Just to get the deal done. And of course, he sells me everything he's going to sell, and he drives off, and the guys take him down right away. I didn't have to do it, and it worked out perfect. But that was it was a reminder that it's stupid. You got to really watch. You got to watch yourself. And the other part of that too is you also get emotionally involved. You start getting too undercover, and you start spending too much time with people. You start liking the people that you're dealing with. And I remember there was one guy, and when I said, okay, well, you bought enough drugs off of him. This was in Elgin. He's done a lot of stuff. I told him, I said, I think I can turn this guy. He's not a bad guy. I think I can get this guy to work for us and see if I can turn him. And so we're driving off, and I know my guys are behind me, and there's guys in front of me, and we're getting ready all to stop. So all of a sudden, the guy in front of me stops, the guy behind me stops, and the guy next to me, he stops, and I pull my gun, and I basically tell him, you're under arrest. He looks at me and goes, man, quit playing with that. Put that thing away. And he didn't believe me. He did not believe me, because we'd gotten to know each other so much that it was just, and I told myself that I'll never allow that to happen again, because it hurts. I actually went out of my way to help him out. Later, we ended up becoming friends over it. But because I knew what he was doing, and I started becoming I started getting stronger empathy And I think there's a part of you that has to be that way, because there are guys out there who, I know you're a cop and I know you have to enforce the law, but there are guys out there who are bad for the sake of being bad. And there's guys out there who are bad because they don't know what else to do. And in my head, I started feeling it no longer was a black and white world to me. It started becoming a very gray world. I did deals, and I'm not going to tell you the names of this one because I actually had a mark on my head for 10 grand on this one. And it was, those who are involved, they know exactly the story. But this was in Kendall County. When they brought me on board it wasn't Kendall County. This was in DeKalb County. And in DeKalb County, when they brought me on board to do all these deals, it was me pretending I was from Humboldt Park, Latin King, dealing with the vice lords in DeKalb and buying a lot of dope off of them. By the time I left the house after the second time, the mother that was there gave me a whole list of all the cars to watch for on the way back to Chicago, because they had done counter surveillance on the site for the Narcotics Bureau, the North Central Narcotics I keep saying DeKalb. And they said, these are all the cars. This is where they're stationed at. If you see any of these cars around, get rid of the dope or get out of there. So as soon as I saw my guys, I was like, hey, listen, you guys are burned. All your cars are burned. All your things are burned. Everything's gone. Even your headquarters. And that ended up being a really, really major case where I had to actually, we tried the best. They did everything they could to see if they can get a plea deal. By the time I was done, I'd bought a lot of drugs from them, ton of information, everything to take them all down. We tried our best to see if we can get them to plea and not have to take it to trial. They refused because they said, you got nothing on us. So they had to burn me in the courtroom to bring me in. And I remember them all sitting, to this day, I remember them all sitting there like that. You got nothing, you got nothing, you got nothing. I walked into the courtroom and they all did like, they go,
that's their oh shit moment.
Yeah, that's when they were reaching over to their attorney, and they called a recess and they took a plea after that. But I'd already been burned. That caused a lot of issues because I had been burned and marked on that one.
Right.
So that was boom. I'm out of that area. So I was a little bit all over the place on there.
That's very interesting what you said about you're developing rapport with these guys and you're starting to see kind of the goodness in them, right? Mm-hmm. And they touch on this in movies, and it sounds like you're a movie guy. One movie is called Donnie Brasco. Did you ever see that?
Yes.
He infiltrates the mafia, and then, he's starting to like a couple of these guys. Mm-hmm. And then they make him chop up a body. In one scene, he's got to chop up the body, otherwise his cover is up, And then the other one is Blow. Did you ever see Blow?
I never saw Blow. No. I saw Donnie Brasco, but I never saw Blow.
Yeah, so at the end of the movie, he had gotten out of the drug business, and he wanted to do one more deal because, he lost all of his empire. And a couple of the guys that he was in business with before, they were actually working for the feds. So they set him up. And at the very last scene of the movie, they make their score, okay? They got the big drug score, and they got all this cash. And he says to these guys, half of them are agents, you guys take an extra 10 grand, I'm done with this. Thanks, And he leaves the room to go to the John, and they're talking about how this really sucks that we got to jail this guy because he really is a good guy.
Good guy, yeah.
And he winds up going to prison. So that's such an interesting perspective on that, making that job hard.
It does. So, I mean, you surprisingly so, you can get close to people.
And you got to act it too, right? You gotta do the shake and the hug and how you doing, right?
Yeah, you got to play the role hardcore.
Yeah,
and then like I said, that's you get empathy. You start feeling, and you start talking about each other's families, and you start talking things like this. To be really good at that kind of thing, like undercover stuff, you don't want to get too far away from the truth. So everything it's very right with just leaving the details out, because you get too far away from the truth, you forget the lies that you're making, and it gets a problem. I did a deal in North Aurora one time and completely forgot that I was wearing a police ring. And during the deal, the guy goes, "Hey, that's a nice looking ring. I mean, let me check that out." And I go, I realize I'm like, shit. I never took that sucker off, And here it says, it was it had Air Force, police on it, and I said, man, we don't have time for that. let's just do this. And he goes, it sounds to me like you're stalling. He goes, I'm not stalling. And I changed the subject enough.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, man, I just felt heated. Like, and now I'm like, oh, crap, this is all going to get blown, you know? And by the way, I'm on a wire and all this is going to get blown. And it's funniest thing. It ended up being a small deal, but it worked. But it was just such an oh shit moment.
Yeah.
I had another one this was in Humboldt Park, and the FBI had the worst wiring system on the planet. You know, it was so hot. It was like 95 degrees out. They had this stuff taped on me. This stuff is falling off. I mean, you can't even, it's coming off. And then they had this box that went in the middle of your lower back. Okay. And so everything is wired to this box in the back, which is uncomfortable as hell because it's got edges.
Right.
But it's starting to get hot. And the box is getting hot. And I don't know what's going on with it. And so I'm having this meeting with this guy. And he goes, man, man, why are you so hot? Why are you sweating? And I'm telling, oh, it's hot in here, man. This is uncomfortable as hell. And he goes, seems like you're nervous. I'm like, nervous? I'm cooking back here. You just don't know it. And that box was getting hotter and hotter. I swear. I'm like, man, I'm getting ready to scream and take this thing off me. You know, so as soon as we got out of this deal, I walk out of there. I'm like, what the hell? And I pull this thing out, and he goes, oh shit, how did you stay that long holding that thing? I go, it burnt my back.
Wow.
Left a mark. It was somehow it had gone bad. And so the middle of the deal, it was like a comedy routine. I'm having this conversation. I'm sweating. All I can feel, I'm not even listening to this guy anymore. I have to rely on what the mic took in just to remember what we were talking about. Because all I was thinking about, I got to get the hell out of here. I got to get the hell out. I'm hurting, you know? And it was just this stupid FBI box.
That's crazy.
It's just dumb stories like that. But I did, so going back to where we were at, that was my time, and that was my time while I was still in patrol, and I went into North Central Narcotics Task Force, and I did that for a while, and then I got later on, shortly after that, I got promoted to sergeant, and so by then I'd left that behind. Went as a sergeant, did a few years as sergeant, mostly on the midnight shift. Later, I became the detective sergeant, which put me back into drug work, more as a consulting part at this time. Now I'm helping out other places. I'm still doing stuff for North Central, but now more like the FBI. My buddy Mario that I was telling you about, he got assigned to the DEA. He was Elgin, but he was DEA task force. So he would call me over. So I'd always go as a consultant and help them out or help him out on deals. But no longer was I doing strictly just undercover work. More, like I said, more now as a consultant. I was part of a couple more OSADETs, but again, it was a group of us, not me. Those days, like I said, those days of just on my own, there were just certain deals, but I had part of a team, and that was that way. We did it all together.
And when you're just doing your job as a patrolman, what is your sidearm? What are you carrying?
At that time, I was carrying a H&K 40.
Wow,
that was my weapon of choice. We all carried 40s, but we chose which we had to carry 40s because they wanted to keep the rounds the same, the ballistics same on it. But I chose the H&K as my weapon of choice.
I'm kind of a gun guy. I'm not a super expert, but I'm starting to doubt the punch of the 9mm because I've seen too many videos where the 9mm didn't get the job done. So I'm reverting back to 45, but that 40 is probably the perfect round.
It was for back then, especially. You're gonna hate me to say this, but now my duty weapon is a 9mm.
Yeah, well, they all are. But
the bullet is what does it. Now the bullet has more stopping power.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a little bit different if you just, it just depends. It really depends on the round.
Yeah, they make really good ammo now. Like some real hot stuff.
Surprisingly, I'm not a gun guy. I tell a lot of guys, it's like, I have people come up to me and say, oh, I've got this. They give me all these details on their guns. In the meantime, I'm like, now if you started telling me a certain type of sword, a certain type of a weapon, I'm all over you. I'm all over.
Gotcha.
But for me, as a lifelong police officer, I'm sorry to say that I look at guns like a carpenter looks at a hammer. Mm-hmm. It's a tool that I use, but it's just a tool that I use. For me, like I said, you show me like that gladius you got hanging over there. You that's the stuff that catches my eye. Yeah. I look at stuff like that. Somebody says, a friend of mine gave me an old school handmade tomahawk as a gift.
Well, when you were sitting down, before we even started the podcast, you were looking at that shelf behind you, which you can see on camera with all the warriors there. You're like, oh, this is cool.
Yes, so. That's the stuff that catches my eye. I'm very old school when it comes to that. I tell everybody, when we talk about the Second Amendment, and I say, hey, I'm more than happy to get rid of guns. When everybody on the planet gets rid of guns, then I'll be right there at the last one. But until then, you're not telling me to disarm myself when the criminals are still armed.
Yeah, and we know that would be impossible to disarm the society.
So it's to me, I look at it as rhetoric and nonsense. It's the same conversations that the politicians are having today about that is the same ones they're going to be having 10 years from now, and same ones they had 10 years ago. It's the same stuff going over, and you're blaming guns for stuff that is like, you're being ridiculous about it. And that's just like I said, I know it's my opinion, but it's just common sense, which I know in today's day and age is no longer common. You know, the fact is, we have DUIs where people are killed all the time. You don't blame it on the cars.
Yes.
Somebody wrote in one of those memes one time. It's like, a guy's overweight. You don't blame it on the fork.
Yes. Yeah. It's simple common sense, and we can save the discussion for another time. But these school shootings that we had, I read a statistic that first of all, we never used to have them, and now we have them with some regularity. But we always had a lot of guns in this country, so it's not related to the gun. Something else is causing this, right?
Yes.
And then there's been like 50-something school shootings in the last 30 years, and every one of the shooters was on some kind of psych med. Exactly. Not 90% of them, 100% of them. So there's something going on there with our society, and it is not a gun problem. I'm all for like very strict gun laws. It should be hard to get a gun, but we should be able to get the gun. We have the strictest gun laws in Chicago, don't we?
But ask yourself this: why aren't we ever looking at those medical issues, those drug issues? Who's stopping us from the? You never hear that. You hear the gun, yep. But you never hear that. That person, all these people. There's a percentage. That's a very high percentage of these people being involved in this. Also they've been on this medication or this medication because there's somebody protecting that.
Yes.
And we can go on that rabbit hole all day long too. Yeah. But the fact is, it's like we villainize this and say this is your problem. But let's not look over here. Let's not look at this area here. We don't want to focus on that. We focus on stuff that we should probably be, let's put it this way, we should probably broaden our view.
I agree. And this is another wormhole, but we can talk about the psychology of people. It's amazing. It's like you and I witnessing the car accident on the street corner. If we were standing shoulder to shoulder, you and I, and we witnessed a car accident right in front of us, right? And then the police came and said, "What did you see?" You would tell a story, and I would tell a story, and the details wouldn't match exactly. Right. And then if they ask you to tell your own story again in a week, it might change. In a month, it might change. Your own perception of what you saw would change. So it's like, it's really hard for us to come to common ground on things when we're not seeing the same thing. We're looking at the same thing, but we don't process the same way.
Absolutely.
So during your police career, where does relationships come in? When does a woman come into your life, and how does that work out? Because it's hard for cops, especially when you're doing all that stuff.
I was, prior to my wife now and my family now, I was married before. And I'm married pretty young, but I always put the blame on myself for what happened to our marriage. I never blame my ex-wife. Bad timing on my part because it was just when I was going into undercover work. I remember that young guy was focused 100% on the deal. I was focused on the job. I spent too much time on the job, and I think a strong part of that I blame on myself for us becoming distant. We became very different people, and I think I pushed away more because it was just not. It was like I didn't feel it was there. I was too busy thinking about something else.
And I wanted to ask you this. I forgot to ask you, but I wrote it down. You talked about ego as it related to these drug deals, but do you think you were getting addicted to the action, to the excitement of it as well?
Absolutely.
And that does not help a marriage.
No, you're back then it was a pager. You're getting a page at 10 o'clock, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and you're feeling like I need to go to a payphone, I need to go to something. Can't do it from home. So you got to go to a payphone someplace, and back then, and
a little adrenaline dump, right?
And you want that adrenaline dump. You want that, and it's funny because you think you're going to miss it until you're out all the way, and you realize that no, I don't miss that. Once you get further and further away, you start realizing that wasn't good for me at all. A lot of things in my life changed because of that, but that adrenaline, that feeling, that ability, oh yeah, it's addicting. It really is. But I will say this, and it was shortly after I'd gotten out of it, and I was basically after my divorce. I kind of lost the feeling of continuously doing narcotics. So I got pulled back to the police department. I started doing general assignment investigations, and that's when I met my wife, who I have now, who's already working for the city of Batavia, and we met when I was doing general assignments. But by then, she had to deal with a different person than my first wife, because my perspective was already that was enough. The loss of my marriage was enough to slap me in the face and make me realize that there was other things that I needed to focus on. And now I started focusing on the possibility of someday having a family and doing other things like that. And that's, like I said, by the grace of God, the woman that I met is now we got 29 years together. To show you that we didn't waste any time. My daughter's 29 years old.
There you go.
She's been wonderful. She's the love of my life. And she's also my partner in crime, a co-conspirator, and the one
which is funny for a cop to say.
Yeah, and the one that I went to first, obviously, when I was approached to do this, to say, hey, how are you about this? Because this is not just me doing it; this is us doing it.
Yeah.
Real quick, I wanted to tell you, I spent a lot of time talking about police work and the narcotics part of it. But I want to share one thing with you that I think a lot of people don't think about when it comes to law enforcement. And the stuff those guys go through and the hurt and pain that they go through. None of those deals, no matter how dangerous they were, there was one incident that I had that I would go through every one of those deals over and over again before I would go through this.
Wow.
And I'll tell you that from my heart, it's the one thing that happened to me that affected everything else that happened afterward. I was working a midnight shift. Remember I told you I was the midnight shift sergeant?
Yep.
Okay, it was towards the end of that string where I was, I think it was like the late, I can't tell you the exact dates, and I don't want to give you too much detail because I also don't want to bring up bad memories for somebody else and their families. But it was the later part of the 90s. I think it was either 98, 99, somewhere around there. Maybe about 98 and 98. I got a call. Cops, when you work at midnight shift, by 6 o'clock in the morning, you're winding down. You're getting your car fueled. It's time to go home. As a supervisor, I know I'm getting ready to go in. So I went inside and started getting the paperwork and going through the reports of the night before and signing everything off. I get a call from a police department down south, Southern Illinois. It said, we need you to do something. We need you to make a notification.
What is that?
A notification is when you tell somebody in their family that somebody has died in their family.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. It falls on the supervisor. This is 6:30 in the morning, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, my God, this is terrible. I've never had anything like this before. I've never had to deal with anything like this before. And so I go to the house. It's almost 7 o'clock in the morning, and I pull up at the house. And I'm thinking to myself, I'll give you a little bit of background on what I was doing. A family had just sent their daughter to college. Freshman in school. It was early in the year, and she was killed. So now I've got, and as I pull up to this house, all I can think about was, I'm walking up to this house, and I'm going to change this family's life. I'm going to put this family through something that they don't know how they're going to be able to deal with this. And it still shakes me up because, like I said, it's like I said, I would be shot at before I would go through something like this again. And I know that I'm approaching this house, and I'm like, how am I going to say? What am I going to say? What do you say? How do you tell somebody that their baby they just sent off to school is not coming home again? So I knock on the door, and the mother answers, and she sees me. She sees my face. She sees the uniform, and she knows. She knew it. The minute she saw me, she goes, please don't. She goes, no, please don't. And I said, your daughter passed away last night. I didn't give her the details of how it happened, but I said, your daughter passed away last night. And I said, I'm so sorry, And she backed up real quick. And you could tell, and she goes, please, don't. She kept saying, don't. And so I went inside the house, and I kind of hugged her and stayed with her for a while. One of the other officers came in, and she was a female officer, and she was there, but I ended up sending her back, and I told her to call our clergy, and have him show up and then see if he can get a hold of their family. And in the meantime, I think she was just trying to keep herself busy. She started proceeding to go upstairs and bring me back pictures of her and show me pictures of her. But then she said something that hit me so hard. She goes, he did it. And I didn't know the details of it. I didn't find out till later, but it turned out that it was she went to school with her boyfriend. And her boyfriend was from St. Charles. She was from Batavia. And he's the one that killed her.
And when she said he did it, she meant him.
Him. And I like I said, I didn't know details. I knew what had happened, but I didn't know the details of that relationship. And she said he did it. And I remember thinking about that and thinking, what does she mean? But I didn't want to get into tell her that because she was showing me pictures of her daughter. And so we sat on the couch together and I stayed with her. I stayed with her probably for about an hour. In the meantime, the little brother came down. He looked at me and just left the house and walked out and went to school. He was upset and he because he knew what had happened to, and he was shutting down. I think he was hearing it from the top of the stairs. But the reason I share that story with you is I know officers go through stuff like that every day, and they go through things like that they're the emotional things that nobody thinks about. Those little things that just tear your soul. You know, the physical stuff. Cops laugh about that stuff. We get punched in the face. We laugh about that stuff later. They're physical, you know, but there's stuff that tears your heart. And it was shortly after that I opened up the Defense Training Institute, the martial arts school, because when I looked at her, how she passed and what happened, I look at it and I say there was room for survival.
Wow.
There was room for survival. Had somebody taught her something, you know, even something very basic. Has somebody said something to her and showed her something, there was room. And I wanted to take that memory and build something from that and know that we could do something better for that. And but I will tell you, like I said, and I'm telling you, Frank, shoot me, let me do the worst deals ever. But when I think of the worst thing that ever happened to me in law enforcement, and by the way, I shot at people. I had people try to run me over with their cars. I had all those things. Give me that. I can talk about that stuff all day long. It doesn't bother me. Don't ever have a situation like that. Yeah, because when you know you're approaching somebody's house and you're about to change their life, and nothing till this day is going to be the same again because of that contact. Man, it's painful. It's painful.
It's an interesting story because when the mother said he did that, she was going through torture up until that point, worrying about her daughter. Right?
Absolutely, she was. I think they'd had some volatile fights before that, and she was worried all the time. Every parent has that as a nightmare. She had it double because you worry about your children anyway.
Right.
But then she had a reason to worry. There was something there that she felt. Moms know. Moms feel. They have an instinct. Just like she knew the minute she saw me. She could see it on my face. I didn't have to get any of the words out. She just told me, please don't. I never forget those words. You know? Please don't tell me what I know you're going to tell me. You know? And she knew it. She knew it. You know? A police officer knocks at your house at that time in the morning. You know it's not good.
There's no way to present that. And I'm a wordsmith. I'm all about words. There's no right words that are going to help that.
Yeah, don't even bother teaching a class on that. Don't even try anything like that. It's all gonna fail because there is, like you said, there is nothing. There's no good way. There isn't. It's just do the best you can and have a heart and be empathetic. And if you have to hug and stay as long as you can. I finally left that house when family started showing up. When first our clergy, he showed up, and then he called theirs. And then more families started showing up. And then I kind of did an Irish exit where I disappeared because I was no longer needed. And I presented a reminder of what had happened. So I just, like I said, I removed myself, but I think I was there till 9:30, 10 o'clock, you know, and then I just left.
It was a very humanity-based thing to sit with her and look at the photos and stuff like that. Yeah. You have to do that.
Yeah, there's nothing more important than that. Yeah. There really isn't. Like I said, I tell officers who do something like that, nobody's going to sympathize with you because that's going to be very painful. But know that whatever pain you're going through, the pain that you are having to give to somebody else is going to be 10,000 times worse. Be there for them as long as you have to be. There is no call. There is nothing you're doing. There is absolutely nothing more important than spending the time. And that is the epitome of our job, is service.
Yes.
You have to be there for other people. And that right there, like I said, that point redirected everything that happened to me after that. In the background, I kept an eye on what happened to the family, and I kind of watched the whole trial, and I watched everything. But it changed my perspective on every part of my job because of that moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's a life-altering thing, whether you're a cop or having to do that. That reminds me of the scene in Saving Private Ryan, not to keep making movie metaphors, but did you ever see that movie?
I did.
So the lady's 5 sons, they all get killed in different battlefields. And there's a scene where the mother's washing the dishes and she sees the army vehicle pull up with the star on it, and out comes an officer and the priest. And she just drops to her knees because she knows the bad news is coming.
Did you ever see the Fighting Sullivans?
Well, I know the story of the Fighting Sullivans.
It's an old black and white.
Yeah.
And so if you ever watch it, it's except for the fact that it's black and white, it's still just as relevant today. And that story, when that guy looks at her and the mother looks at him and says, "Which one?" And he goes, "All 5."
Yeah.
That was something she wasn't expecting. It changed the way the military did everything after that.
And Saving Private Ryan, the brothers, 4 of the 5, they all got killed, but they were all in different battlefields. Yeah. They were not even in the same theaters of war because of the Sullivan brothers. They wouldn't let them serve in the same ship, the same,
right.
So.
And she lost them all. And they're like, we can't let this lady lose her last one.
Yeah.
Pull right out, yeah.
And then going back to law enforcement, and we talked about this already, you guys basically have a career dealing with the shit of humanity. Mm-hmm. Nobody calls you up and says, "Hey, Officer Perez, I just wanted to... I baked these cookies for you. You guys are doing a stellar job. Thank you for everything that you do." You don't get that. You're going on, domestic violence, shootings. You've heard every excuse in the book. You guys should collaborate and write a book on, the biggest lines of bullshit you've ever heard. You've heard it all, right?
Yes, yeah. And it's like I said, it's a very, very thankless job. And if you're getting into it, you've got to be able to do with that thing that you're trying to do better for service for the betterment of mankind, for helping out others. But it is very thankless, But that being said, you once in a while you get people that just, you look at it and you're like, a little kid comes up to you and says, can I touch your badge? Can I hold your hand? And they did and things like that. And it's like that little kid right there just made it worth it. Little things like that. So cops look for those little things.
Yep. And I want to tell you what I do as often as I can. I of course thank veterans all the time when they wear the hats and stuff. But when I see police officers, if they're approachable, they're parked in a parking lot or whatever, I'll walk up to them and I'll hold up my hand and I'll say, "Thank you for serving our community. You guys have a shit job these days." And I started doing this during the defund the police nonsense. Mm-hmm. And I said, "You guys have a shit job these days. And I just wanted to thank you for serving our community. And I also want you to know that I'm a conceal and carry. And if I ever saw an officer in distress, I would fight side by side with you at the risk of my own life." I shake their hand.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's saying a lot, because everybody would appreciate that, because you think you're in the field by yourself. To have somebody like you come up to them and tell them, "Hey, listen, you're not there by yourself. There are some people out there who say, I'll get in the dirt with you. I'll jump in the foxhole with you." That's an amazing thing.
And I've never had any cop say anything other than, "Way to go." When you tell them you're a conceal and carry, they're like, "Way to go." It's like they want that, so.
As a law enforcement officer, I never had a problem with that, because I know that you're vetted, and I know that there's good people out there that got your back.
Yeah.
And it's, if you do a traffic stop and says, "I've got concealed carry," so that's fine. Where's it at right now? Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So now we are kind of almost up to present time. You have a martial arts studio. Tell me about that.
I run the Defense Training Institute. It's in Aurora. We opened up in 1998. So I originally opened it up in 98 in Aurora. And what was that back then was Aurora had an older police department, so they ended up opening up precincts at what was first originally was the Aurora Central High School, ended up being like a precinct and a building that the city bought. And that was where the Defense Training Institute started, in that building. So I started it there. After a couple of years of running the school out of there, I moved it to Batavia, kept it in Batavia for about 18, 19 years, and then moved it back to Aurora back in 2017.
So that's one of your passions, and obviously it's an income stream. What else are you doing? You had mentioned you're still doing something in law enforcement, yes?
I am. After I retired in 2016, Sheriff Ron Hain, who's the current Kane County Sheriff, asked me if I'd be interested in returning back to police work. And I told him, I said, Ron, I got to tell you right now, I'm not dealing with people anymore. I go, those days are done. I go, I want to just teach. And he goes, funny you would say that. He goes, we're trying to put together our training division, and we'd like to know if you would like to come on board as originally it was as a consultant, like a contractor position for all the combatives, train their public safety, corrections, and court security. Train them all the same way. They've got 3 different programs going on right now. Can you combine them all in one and kind of train everybody in the same system? I said,
came to the right guy, didn't you?
I'd love doing stuff like that. Little does he realize that I probably would have done it for free, because I love doing stuff like that. But it was.
We'll edit that out so he doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't. We don't. Yeah, it's too late. Too late. I'm on.
Contract signed.
What happened though in 2020, when George Floyd had the incident. Okay, with him, and it was that rhetoric with very much anti-cop everything. I mean, everybody wanted to defund the police. It was just terrible times for law enforcement. Any insurance that I had, there's 3 different types of insurance. People don't understand when it comes. You have martial arts training, which is not a big deal. Boxing is by far the high. If you own a boxing gym, you're paying a lot of insurance. But combatives is high. And so for me to have combatives training, insurance to protect myself and still work for the sheriff's office became astronomical. It's not even worth it. I'm like, I talked to Ron and I said, hey, listen, there's no way I can continue doing this. I'm putting myself in danger, my family in danger. He goes, there's an easy way out of this. He goes, why don't we deputize you? You're no longer a consultant or a contractor. You come on board as the sheriff's office. So I said, okay, that works for me. I'll come on board as a deputy. In 2020, I became a deputy with the sheriff's office, and I continued to do the same training. So nothing changed other than my position.
Oh, good. Nice. So why running for State Senate District 42? What drives you to do that now? First, explain it to you what it means to be an Illinois senator representing a district.
For my part, here's the thing, and I more so recently I found this out that. As I'm going door to door and I'm talking to people, one question that I ask everybody, do you know who your senator is? And 98%, and by the way, I'm included in that 98%, have no idea. Never heard of their senator. And I believe that it's not your job to know your senator. It's your senator's job to get to know you. They should be out there hustling. They should be out there meeting their constituents. They should be out there having going to the events, trying to meet the people and say, hey, what can I do to help you? This is what I think about the Illinois Senate or senators. Senators are your boots on the ground. They're your guys in the field. Just like in the military, just like you have to have those people. You have to have people who say, what do my people need? For myself, I look at the 42nd district and I look at the businesses and I look at the community. I look at the programs going on. My job is to do what I can for those communities in the 42nd district from a boots on the ground level and way of thinking. You're talking about if you're telling me that you're interested in public safety. Okay, I'm interested in public safety. It's very, very important to me. Okay, what were your thoughts on defund the police? Oh, I wasn't for it. So did you stand up and fight for them? No, I did not. Then you just didn't say anything. What do we say? What is the old saying about that? The old biblical saying about that is when good men do nothing in the face of evil, then
that's the worst of all evil, right?
That's the worst of all evil. Exactly. Things for my position. What I want to do is I want to help out with the public safety, but I want to get to know the people on the boots on the ground level. I'm always going to push, obviously, for my background on public safety. But I don't want to be one of those, you get all these politicians where they've been in it for a while or they're brand new to it. And they're going to come and you're going to say, Frank, you're going to ask me, you're going to say, what would you do? And I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do because every politician tells you what they're going to do. I'm going to tell you what I've done. I've lived a life of service. Okay. I've done what I can for everybody. All I'm going to do is take that service and explode it into a bigger scale. Okay. I'm going to do what I've been doing. And if you're not sure, look at my background. Okay. Along with the martial arts school, I formed a program called MAGIC, Martial Arts Gang Intervention Club. It's a program designed to keep kids off the street at hardly no cost to them. No cost to them, so I can get them off the mats and off the streets. I run Kicking for Kids, where every year we do. As a matter of fact, we have one coming up this Saturday. Where we raise funds for kids we have kids helping kids. So last year we had a school in Nicaragua that had no running water at all. So we built the kids did kicking for them, and they raised money to build a well in Nicaragua. This year we're doing for Cal's Angels, where we're doing for cancer research, for pediatric cancer research. So we teach our kids, even at their level, hey, you're healthy, you're strong. There are other kids who are not. Let's do something for them. All things like that. And by the way, I've been doing those things for years. And here's the kicker. No pun intended. Oh, maybe a little. I didn't come into this asking to be a senator. They came to me. I had a guy come to me, and this is what he does. And he's telling this story. He says, I reached out to him on Facebook. This is what he's talking about. He said, you get a message on Facebook that says, hey, how are you interested in being a senator? Swipe, get rid of that. Okay, next. 2 weeks later, hey, I need to talk to you about this. I'm very interested in talking to you about becoming a senator. Swipe, bye-bye. He sent me, by the time he sent me the third message, I said, okay, let me send this guy a message back and say, see what he really wants. But I'll have him email me. Email me at this if you're interested in talking about this further. He emails me. I'll let him email me again. I made him go through so many loops before he finally decided to meet with me. And then he explained. And when he actually told me what he wanted, I thought he wanted me to help out in some other capacity. When he says, hey, are you interested in doing it? I'm telling you right now, Frank, you don't go up to a fighter and ask him if you want to fight and think that he's going to walk away from it. I went to my family. I pulled them aside and I said, listen, we have this opportunity to make a difference. Do what we can for our community. Are you guys interested in doing it? Okay, because it's not me. It's all of us. My son, my daughter, my son, my wife. We're all in this together, all four of us. We all talked about it. We all said, let's do it. Let's do it together. So I reached back out to them. I said, you know what? I'm in. But if I'm in to fight. And like I said, I'm taking that warrior mentality and I'm taking it to the people. Mm-hmm. And I want to help. Whether it's public safety. I want to support programs for our kids. I want to keep them off the streets. I want to do what we can. And I know they say there's programs out there, but I tell you right now, there's great programs and there's guys that I know that are struggling to do what they can and they're not getting funding. I want to be there to help. By the way, Frank, I don't care if your program, your senator is a Democrat, Republican, Independent, I could give a damn. If you tell me that you have a program that's going to help out kids, you and we may not see philosophically in the same page or see the same thing, but we have to meet that in that common ground. And helping kids is the common ground. Every piece of that platform that I have is common ground. I want safer communities. Of course I want safer communities. But you know what? Unlike anybody else, I actually have a plan on how to do it, and I can tell you how to do it. You want to see your police departments do better? You want to see them do better? I'll tell you what, right now, blame it on the city and your cities and your counties. Because it's not the police departments. Everyone has a limitation on how many police officers they have. Okay, let's say you have 50 officers mandate. Find me a police department that actually has 50 officers working. If that's their minimum, I guarantee you they're not going to have 50 officers. They're going to have somebody hurt. They're going to have somebody going to school. They're going to have somebody pregnant. They're going to have something going on, that's happening that's taking them off the road. While they're off the road, so now you're down 50 officers become 46. You're below minimums. What do they say? Put it on overtime. But when are they training? When are you sending them training? If you got them all working overtime and they're not covering the streets, who are you blaming now? Don't keep pushing keep looking at the police departments, boots on the ground. Guys on the ground know where the problem is. He goes, you want to run your police department correctly? You have minimums of 50, you get your police officers at 55. Mm-hmm. You don't have to like it. But if you want to take care of your communities, if you want to take care of communities, find ways to cover those officers' payments, make sure that they're taken care of. Now I can get guys trained. Why are our firefighters so professional? Because they're training all the time, nonstop. There's not fires everywhere. Nowadays they're helping out the ambulance, but they're also training nonstop. Our police officers are not. They're not getting the training. It's not that they don't want. They want to train. They want to be more professional. Where are you getting them from? I guarantee you, every police department that talk to anybody, and they'll tell you we're always below minimums. So if you're below minimums, you run at minimums. And like I said, it's the same issue. So we start there. We start at that ground. And right now, you got people in city halls and county boards, their heads are exploding. And they're saying, you can't say stuff like that. And go, that's the fact. That's the fact. On your bigger cities like Aurora and Elgin, you got your SOG units, make sure those guys are trained. But don't get rid of them. Those guys, the old saying, people come to you, hey, you got a nice town, it's nice and quiet. I say, thank you. I'm sorry, I say, you're welcome. Yeah. Because so when you got a city like Aurora, which is my city, and you say, I'd like to get rid of our SOG unit. I don't think we need them anymore because the town is nice and quiet. Well, why do you think this town is nice and quiet? Why do you think? Because those guys have been doing their job. I grew up in Aurora. I saw Aurora go downhill. I saw a time when you couldn't even go downtown Aurora and do anything. Now people are talking about what's the best restaurant to go in downtown Aurora and the best places to go. And we can go visit the Paramount and go see a movie and go eat dinner. That was those conversations we weren't having 20 years ago. If your police departments are doing their job, we could continuously train them and continue to have them do the job to protect our city. But we don't talk about defunding, okay? You don't need to defund. You need to fund. We need to train these guys. You want professionals? Treat them like professionals, okay? This thing not right now with what's going on with ICE. And everybody looking at, they're Gestapo. I never heard such terrible stuff in my life, okay? I'll tell you right now, you don't want to hear it? You know why they're wearing masks? They're wearing masks to protect their families. Because when this first started, everybody forgot. But when this first started, they weren't wearing masks. And people were identifying where they lived. They were pointing out where their families were at. They were pointing out where their kids were at school. And they were going ahead and saying, hey, these are their kids, these are their families. And they're putting that stuff online. These officers and their police officers have to protect their families. And you're telling them these politicians, we don't know who they are. You know who they are because they're vetted. They're vetted through their organizations. They're police officers, okay? They are vetted and you know who they are. And for you to call them Gestapo or Nazis is just ridiculous.
Same people are doing that. Didn't say anything about Antifa burning down our cities, all wearing masks, right?
Absolutely.
It was throwing frozen water bottles at the Chicago police in Grand Park.
Water.
Frozen.
Yeah, but frozen water or urine?
Urine. There you go.
There you go. That's the other one. So that's what they were doing. This whole thing now. Charlie Kirk was killed, 3 weeks ago now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think we're talking so much about what's happening in ICE with everything there? Because it's like, here go again. I don't want you to see what's happening over here. I don't want you to talk about, I don't like that subject. Let's not talk about that subject. Let's talk about this subject. Let's focus on this. And so we're constantly talking about this right now. So you're no longer paying attention to what happened there.
Amen, brother.
And that's
to the choir.
Yep, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. So it's a whole world of misdirection. I know that those officers out there doing the best jobs they can, are protecting their families and are doing their job. Everybody comes to me and says, how do you feel about this? It's the law. It's not about my feelings. You didn't have a problem. When I was enforcing other stuff, you didn't ask me about my feelings. My job was to enforce the law. You want to change the law, you go through the right ways to change the law. Okay? Now, do I feel that there's a part of me that feels that both Republican and Democrat are a little lazy on both sides? Yes. Yes, because one says, get them out. One says, keep them in. There's better ways. There's better ways. And that's a little lazy. Okay? So we understand that we can figure out better ways to do this. But we have to sit down and we have to say, okay, mom, dad, see if you guys can get together and talk at the table so that the kids can actually benefit from all this conversation. So when you guys are walking away like what happened just recently and saying we're shutting down and we're not going to have this conversation because we can't discuss it, who suffers for that? This fight between the Democrats and the Republicans and all this stuff going on right now is to me, it looks like it's just like misdirection. What am I missing? I keep asking myself, what am I not seeing when this is happening? But the fact is, we have to find unity and common ground on certain things. If you and I were on opposing sides, Frank, we would have to say, okay, listen, Frank, you and I are not going to agree on everything, but is there some things we can agree on? And when we find that one thing we can agree on, we go 100% on that. Hey, I love my wife. She's the love of my life. Do I agree with her 100% on everything she says? I can't. I don't. We have our discussions and we don't 100% agree because we're different human beings. But we still, we still get along. We love each other. We continue to move on.
So I want to just throw this at you. I've had a lot of people on the podcast and that are running for some offices in Illinois, and the one common thing they all have is they're all Jesus-based Christians.
Yes.
And I am noticing a resurgence of that. I think we're in a great awakening as a country where people are turning back to God, so that's a good thing. However, I'm extremely cynical. I believe that from the top down, we're screwed. Like both parties are crime families at the upper echelon. I voted for Trump, and I don't regret voting for him, but I'm also looking at a lot of things he does that with a twisted eye. I just think that the deep-seated corruption is so rooted at the top that we're screwed. So I'm cynical that way. However, the way we can actually make our lives better is from the ground up. So what we do in our community, like you said, you wanted to be in a small community and a police force to make a bigger difference. That's what I see happening now, is that we're starting to build our communities from the ground up. And I don't know if it'll ever grow into the top, but we can make our communities very safe and we all get along. And I think that's the best we can do right now.
You know that I was saying when they say if you surround yourself with 5 strong, motivated people, you become the 6th. If you're 5 strong, healthy people, you become the 6th. It's that way. You got guys like, and I'll start throwing some like Mendrick, Dr. Robert. I've never met him before, but Andy Williams.
They've all been on the podcast.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I those first 2 I've met and spent a lot of time. I'm sorry. I've met Dr. Robert, and him and I spent a lot of time together. He talks about Mendrick a lot. Andy Williams, I've never met him, but I kind of follow the stuff that he says and everything. And I look, if you can surround yourself with people like that, and those are your core, there's something that we're starting here in Illinois that everyone's going to look at. If we can find a way to work together and we see, like I said, those strong individuals, that's going to rise. And that's going to rise, and it's going to build. And what you're seeing now is something that 5 years from now you look and say, "Man, remember when that started?" It's a new movement, and everybody. And one of the things that on my cards that I give to everybody, on the bottom it says, "In God we trust." In God, in Jesus Christ, there is nothing that we can do. That we can't do without Him behind us and pushing us forward. And I tell my wife all the time, if I don't get this, then I don't get this. I keep doing what I've been doing and keep pushing forward, helping out as many people as I can. Yep. If I can help others, I'll help them. But if I feel that calling, that something's telling me, hey, you need to do this a little bit further. We're not done with you yet. Then I'm going to try it, And if it's only meant for me to do it 4 years, or by the grace of God, 8 years, or whatever, I'll do the best I can, and then prepare somebody else to do the same thing again. I don't believe that. That old saying, and it sounds crass, but I do understand the concept behind it, that politicians are like diapers. They need to be changed often. We sometimes don't have to hold those positions for very long. There's room for other people to step in. If you stay in those positions too long, there's also a chance you're going to get corrupted as well. And I think that it's not about money. It's never been about money. It's always about power. It's about control. One of the beauties that I have is that I can go into this and say, you know what? I'm fine. I was at a stage in my life where my kids are now old enough where my wife and I kind of look at them and say, we're not going to push you guys, but grandchildren would really be nice, but we're not going to push. We're at a point where we're trying to simplify our lives, and then we get the opportunity to do more to make a difference. I'm telling you right now, I don't want to serve at the table. I don't want to sit at the table. I want to grab that table by the bottom and just toss it up in the air. Okay, I want to flip the table and start all over again. And if it takes guys like Andy Williams, Sheriff Mendrick, Dr. Robert, and groups like that, the people that have started I forget the name of the organization in Chicago that flipped Chicago red. That people like that are outliers. If it takes people like that, I want to be in that group. Because we're starting something that we can help out everybody and be on the same page. And that doesn't mean we have to fight. We're not fighting. We want to work together with everybody. But let's do it in the right way. And you know what? The biggest push we have is let's do it by standing with our church, our clergy, and God. Working together.
Amen.
And if you use that as your point of reference, you can't. It's the best compass on the planet. It's pointing you in the right direction. It is literally like I put this in my book. It is literally a lighthouse that's going to guide you to where you need to go. That light shuts off, you're in trouble. But if that light's lit up and you're heading, you're going to find the right direction. Yep. And I think all those guys are doing the exact same thing. I look forward to meeting, these people. I will look forward to having conversations. But I know that we're all on the same page. And even though we're all getting pushback, I'm getting pushback. I got friends that are Democrats that are like, how could you? How could you? Because God's calling me to do what I'm doing.
Yes.
And you're saying that I'm wrong. That's fine. You can feel that way, but I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
I feel that I'm in the right direction and I'm pushing. And I believe I was born here. I was married here. I raised my kids in this state. And you know what? There's a good possibility my grandchildren will be raised in this state too. I want to do the best I can for this state. It has potential. It has possibility. Let's do the best we can.
Awesome, my brother.
Yeah.
I do a lot of social media posting, and I try to be neutral, but we are so dictated by emotions now, and the people controlling the media, by and large, are trying to twinge people's emotions, and that the time of that is over. We are in the age of the warrior now, and all these warriors, you guys are suiting up on the battlefield, right? Mm-hmm. You're all saying, okay, it's time. It's time. I've been a warrior my whole life, and now your guys are getting older, and you're like, now the drive it's one for all. And that's what's happening with you and Mendrick and Andy Williams and Dr. Robert Renteria. You're all powered by Christ, and you're all warriors. A lot of police are coming into politics now because it's required. Like, we need it now.
We need it. So, we need those old school fighters. Those, and like I said, those boots on the ground, the guys who played the hard roles, and now we're looking at it from that perspective and saying, you know what, this is what we see, and this is what we could do to make it better. And if we get the opportunity, how can we say no?
Awesome, brother. Mm-hmm. Well, it's been a great honor to have you on the podcast and get to know you. I support you in any way I can. It warms my heart that the Warriors are amassing. Like, we are going to make a difference from the bottom up, and we can make our state better. And Mendrick told me, I was thinking about moving to Alabama, and my son said, I ain't going anywhere. And he goes, well, then I ain't going anywhere either. I'm making my stand here. I'm making my stand here too. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you.
Yep, so. Absolutely.
Mr. Eddie Perez, I want to shake your hand. Been a great honor to meet you, my friend. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate you having me here. This is awesome.
I'm glad you told your story and the stuff you went through and shared some of the personal stuff. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us for our podcast. Remember, there's a warrior inside us all, and we'll see you at our next podcast. Eddie, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you all.